Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto Rakuto Senin Reborn. Part 1. If you guys enjoy this, what if? Comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. So let's start the video. Naruto's and Sasuke's attacks hit straight on, creating a large explosion that sent both boys flying in opposite directions. Both Kyuubi's one-tailed form and Sasuke's cursed seal form faded, and both of them hit the ground hard. There was silence for a few seconds before Naruto slowly got himself up. He weakly moved himself over to Sasuke, who was unconscious. Naruto grunted, "I'm taking you home now. Team." With that, Naruto fell backwards into unconsciousness. A couple of seconds after this, there was the sound of the wind shifting, and a mysterious black figure appeared. The figure was cloaked in a black haori and a pair of black pants as well. The figure's head was cloaked so his eyes could be seen, nor could his mouth or nose be seen due to the cloak hiding them. He casually put his hand on his chin and spoke out loud to himself, "Blonde hair check. Whisker marks check. Jinchuriki of Kyuubi check." The figure, whose voice revealed him as a young man, took a breath of relief, finally found the kid. He didn't make it easy. The man walked over and picked up the young Jinchuriki and put him on his back with the boy's head on his shoulder. The man smiled under his mask, "No need to worry, kid. That hellhole of a village won't be bothering you again." Just as the figure was about to leave, Kakashi jumped down into the valley beside the fallen Uchiha. He had a kunai ready. "Put Naruto down," Kakashi ordered. The man didn't seem impressed. "Who are you to make demands of me? I am a Jonin of Konoha, and I am ordering you to drop the boy and leave, or I shall take him back by force." Kakashi could feel the man's eye pierce his soul even though he couldn't see them. The man held out his left arm and formed his hand as if he was about to flick the air. "Egan, boy." With that, the man flicked his figure, and Kakashi suddenly felt like he had been punched in the face. He flew back but did manage to regain his footing. His eyes shot up ready to fight his opponent, but to his surprise and horror the man and Naruto were gone. The only trace left was a slight trail of settling dust falling down, as if the man had jumped sky high. Kakashi quickly summoned Pakin. "Pakin, someone has taken Naruto. I need you to track them." Pakin quickly sniffed around, but he turned to Kakashi sadly, "Kakashi, there isn't any trail to follow." Kakashi blinked in surprise. "What do you mean there isn't a trail to follow?" "Just that. Whoever it was left no trace of himself or Naruto here to follow." Kakashi spent a couple of seconds taking it all in before he screamed out his frustration and slammed his fist into the ground below. His fist was bleeding but he didn't care. He had failed his student. "Naruto." Kakashi whispered sadly as a single tear fell from his lone eye. The retrieval team solemnly made their way through Konoha to the Hokage Tower. Very few people noticed the absence of Naruto, and everyone noticed that the Uchiha prodigy was slung over Choji's shoulder. When the team reached the Hokage Tower, Tsunade, Jiraiya and Shizune were waiting for them. "We got back to Uchiha, brat," Choji said grudgingly. "Well, at least the civilian council will be happy," Shizune grunted. "Where's Naruto?" came Jiraiya's voice. Tsunade and Shizune looked at the retrieval team and also noticed the absence of the blonde knucklehead. "Kakashi," Tsunade said in a dangerously low voice. "Where is Naruto?" Kakashi took a deep breath. He was taken. Alarmed, Jiraiya shot towards the Koppanen. "Taken by whom? Describe them." "Master Jiraiya, he was taken by only one person. He was a cloaked man entirely in black. However, I couldn't identify him." "His cloak," Jiraiya stated. "Did it have anything on it?" "No, it didn't. It was just plain black. So most likely it wasn't Akatsuki," Jiraiya thought to himself. Tsunade was glaring holes into the Jonin. "If you saw him, why didn't you stop him?" "The Kage-sama, I did try to stop him." Tsunade slammed her fisting into her desk, breaking it. "Then why isn't he here?" "I don't know how he did it, but he finger flicked the air in front of himself and it suddenly felt like Guy had given me a dynamic entry straight to my face. By the time I had regained my bearing he was gone. I summoned Pakin to track him, but he couldn't find any trace of either the man or of Naruto." Tsunade and Jiraiya blinked in surprise. Pakin couldn't find any trace of them. "Nothing." Kakashi shook his head no. There was a moment of silence before a large shout of frustration and the sound of a fist connecting to a wall could be heard across Konoha from the Hokage Tower. Surprising everyone in their room, the perpetrator was Jiraiya. "Jiraiya," Shizune began but she was cut off as Jiraiya turned around and positioned himself on the windowsill. "Jiraiya, where are you going?" Tsunade asked with authority. Jiraiya, however, barely even glanced at her. "To find my godson." With that, Jiraiya was gone, leaving everyone in the room in stunned silence. After Jiraiya left, the retrieval team left to take the Uchiha to the hospital. When they got there, Sakura was waiting for them. "Sasuke-kun." Sakura shouted as she ran up to Choji, who was still carrying him. "What the hell happened to him?" Sasuke wouldn't come back willingly, so Naruto fought him into unconsciousness to get him back for you, Neji said with a slight glare. So here's your damn Uchiha traitor. Sasuke isn't a traitor. Sakura yelled at him. It was caused by the cursed seal. I thought you knew this. And what do you mean that demon fought him into unconsciousness? I told Naruto to bring Sasuke back, not beat him back. He didn't have a choice in the matter, Shino stated. He shouldn't have harmed Sasuke-kun. Will you just shut up, you troublesome banshee? Shikamaru said angrily, surprising everyone with his actual show of effort. Naruto's gone now because of that request of yours. Unfortunately, Hinata happened to be passing by at that exact moment and heard what Shikamaru said. She stared at her friends in horror. Neji noticed her and elbowed Shikamaru's arm. Shikamaru turned and saw Hinata, a horrified expression on her face. Troublesome, Shikamaru thought. Hinata, what happened to Naruto? Hinata asked, terrified of the answer. Naruto managed to beat Sasuke, Neji began to tell her. But apparently some arrived right after both fell unconscious and took Naruto. Managed to beat Kakashi, too. He told us that the man performed a single flick of the finger in midair and suddenly it felt like Gai-sensei did a dynamic entry straight into his face. Many of them winced at that. Hinata looked at her cousin, Soi I don't know if he's alright. Neji shook his head. Sakura scoffed, good riddance. Who needs that pathetic demonic done anyway? The rest of the Konoha 12 members that were there all glared. But before anyone could retort, Sakura suddenly fell victim to a very strong blow to her stomach that sent her to her knees. Sakura looked up and to her surprise and to the surprise of the retrieval team, the attacker was Hinata. How dare you, Sakura, Hinata said angrily and without a stutter, much to the shock of those present. How dare you? Naruto risked his life to get your precious Uchiha back for you, and this is how you thank him. I'd sooner partner up with members of the Sound Village than with you. Everyone was shocked. They had never seen Hinata act like this at all. With her speech done, Hinata stormed off. The retrieval team couldn't help but feel sorry for her. The love of her life was now Kami knows where and in Kami knows condition and she couldn't do anything for him. Sakura soon managed to recover from Hinata's strike. What the hell is that freak's problem? How could she stand up for that demon? The retrieval team glared at her. Sakura. You better get out of our line of sight or we will hurt you. Sakura blinked at her comrades. What? Neji began counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2. Alright, I get it. I just don't see why that demon's so important to you. But that she walked away. Shikamaru sighed, troublesome. I'd have to agree with you there. The retrieval team looked up to see Kakashi walking up to them. Strangely, the orange book he always had wasn't in sight. Sorry about my student. It's not your fault, Neji told the Koppanen. Choji, take the Uchiha traitor inside. Toji nodded and went inside. Neji, Shikamaru and Shino looked at the Exanbu member. So, what's going on? Tsunade's in a council meeting discussing the mission's results. Shikamaru shook his head, troublesome. Tsunade looked around the room. The Shinobi Council, the Civilian Council, and the elders were all there. Tsunade looked at the council gathered and began. Less than 2 hours ago, the retrieval team managed to bring back Uchiha Sasuke to the village. Both sides of the council breathed a sigh of relief. One councilman spoke up, where is the Uchiha now? He is currently in Konoha Hospital being treated for severe injuries. But that sentence there was an uproar from the civilian side of the council. What? Who harmed the Uchiha? He should be punished severely for such an act. Silence. Tsunade shouted and the entire civilian side instantly closed their mouths. Let me continue. From the report of the mission, Uchiha Sasuke did not come willingly and was beaten into submission by one Uzumaki Naruto. The council was instantly in an uproar again. What? The demon brat was responsible for this. He tried to kill the Uchiha. That brat must be executed. Shut up. Tsunade shouted. The council immediately shut up. Uzumaki Naruto is the reason I called you all here. So we are deciding his punishment I guess, a more rounded member of the civilian council asked arrogantly. No, the problem is much more serious. Did the demon get loose? Asked Shoza Akimichi worriedly. No, Tsunade said and with a deep breath uttered one phrase. Uzumaki Naruto, Jinchuriki of Kyuubi no Kitsune, was kidnapped when he fell unconscious after he defeated the Uchiha. There was a silence that followed. A stunned silence. Even Danzo seemed surprised at this turn of events. It was then that Hyuga Hiashi spoke up, who kidnapped him? Who took the boy? Tsunade sighed, Kakashi is the only one who saw the perpetrator, but Kakashi described him as a man entirely in black who didn't seem worried that a powerful jonin like Kakashi was in his way. According to Kakashi, the man merely flicked the air in front of him and, again according to Kakashi, felt an impact to his skull that wasn't dissimilar to one of Gai's dynamic entries. The entire Shinobi Council and the elders winced at that. By the time Kakashi regained his bearing the man was gone as was Naruto, the council blinked. They knew that even if something as strong as one of Gai's dynamic entries struck Kakashi head-on, his recovery still would have been very quick. The man must have been incredibly fast for Kakashi not being able to see him. Kakashi summoning Pakken to track him, but the summon couldn't find any trace that the man was even there to begin with. The Shinobi Council gaped. Pakken couldn't track this guy. Who in this world could hide themselves so well that fast? HMPH, so the demon's gone. Who cares? A councilman spoke out loud, earning a glare from the shinobi side and from the elders. Perhaps you don't realize what this means, do you? Shikaku, the Jonin commander, asked the civilian council member, who shook his head. It means, Hyuga Hiyashi continued. Konoha has lost its advantage over the other shinobi nations. The civilian council looked confused. Tsunade nodded her head, yes, the other nations each have Jinchuriki, however, we had the strongest one, the Kyuubi. With it gone, Konoha is now greatly weakened. So what if Kyuubi is gone, shouted another council member. We have the Uchiha brat. He can grow to take on a Jinchuriki. Really? Tsunade asked sarcastically. An Uchiha boy, a genin no less, has the strength to match up with a Jinchuriki, who most of which are either N and some have a very strong leash on their demons. Can that teenager match up against a being that took the Shodai Hokage to match up against? The council is silent. They didn't have a retort for this. Danzo then spoke up, we need to send out search teams for the Jinchuriki at once. Inoichi sighed, really, you think our search teams will have any luck in finding someone that Kakashi was right on top of but still couldn't find any trace of him? And if what he says is true about his skill and speed, he's probably as far as I would by now. Besides, Tsunade spoke up. Jiraiya is out there frantically searching for him. He and his spy network will find him. For all our sake, I hope you are right, Hikage-sama. When Naruto awoke, the first he could see was only blurs and shapes. However, as the images got clearer, he could tell he was neither in his apartment nor in Konoha's hospital. He seemed to be in a stone room. He managed to sit up a bit, enduring some pain along the way, and he took a look at his surroundings. Despite it being made of rock, the room seemed rather homey. He was in a nice comfortable bed, there was a dresser, a desk, and a small bookcase. The room was very nicely lit up, adding to the homey feel of it. Where am I? As if in a queue, a door on the other side of the room opened and a man entered. He was cloaked and was wearing entirely black. Naruto blinked before narrowing his eyes. Who are you? Hold that thought, boy, let me get out of this. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at the men's casual tone. Naruto watched as the man removed his cloak to reveal his face. The man looked around his mid-20s if Naruto had to guess, and had long black hair tied into a long ponytail that reached mid-back. The ponytail, however, looked so smooth and so narrow it would have been more accurate to call it a dragon tail. The man's eyes, however, were the most curious part of him. His eye color was midnight blue, that wasn't strange. It was the fact that the whites of his eyes were pitch black. Yet for some reason it didn't disturb Naruto for whatever reason. The air around him did seem to be an air of power, but it was still gentle. Now, what was your question again, boy? The man asked, raising an eyebrow. Naruto deadpanned. I asked who you were. Ah, right. The man held out his hand to Naruto. My name is Mahoutsukai Kyosu, the mortal harbinger of Yami himself. At your service, of course. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. You serve Yami? As in, the god of darkness Yami? Now it was Kyosu's turn to deadpan. Yes, that Yami. Tell me, how many other Yamas do you know? But, how'd it happen? Kyosu finished for him. A story for another time, however, I am not here to talk about myself. I am here to talk about you. Naruto blinked. Me? Yes, you, Kyosu answered as he sat on a stoop beside Naruto's bed and crossed his arms. First, let me clarify this. I know you're the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Naruto froze and stared at the man with downright horror. Kyosu rolled his eyes. You know, if you keep giving me that face with every bit of information I give you, you might as well just keep your face like that. Naruto immediately wiped the look of shock from his face and looked at Kyosu. Is that the reason why you brought me here? Kyosu held up his hand and shook it a little in a sort of type of manner. Naruto then blinked again. Where is here exactly? How long was I out for? You have been out for about a day or so. And as for where you are in my little, underground abode in Uzushiogakure, the home of your ancestors on your mother's side. My mother, Naruto shouted and tried to sit farther up on his bed, but the pain forced him back down. Kyosu was instantly by his side helping him lay back down. Easy, kid. You're still sore from your fight with him. What happened to Sasuke anyway? Naruto asked him. Your sensei took him back to Konoha, however, I brought you here. He left me? Naruto asked, feeling hurt and betrayed. No, he tried to stop me, but I knocked him away. Why shall I get to in a moment? Naruto nodded as Kyosu continued. Anyway, back onto the subject of your parents. Your mother was Uzumaki Kushina, the Chishio no Habanero red hot-blooded habanero. She was a member of the Uzumaki clan, the clan that led the village of Uzushiogakure, where we are right now. Naruto gaped in surprise. My mother's clan had a village. Kyosu nodded with a grin. Yep, the sole leaders. They were famous, and some might say infamous, for their skills with the sword and nin. They are a very powerful clan. In fact, they are a cousin clan to the Senju. Furthermore, the Shodai Hokage's wife was in Uzumaki. Really? Yep, and while I am thinking about it, his wife, Uzumaki Mito, was the first Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, the second was your mother, and you are the third. Naruto blinked in surprise and in shock. He couldn't believe it. His mother and the Shodai Hokage's wife were not only of the same clan, but they were also the Jinchuriki of the fox before he was. Naruto looked up at him, what happened to my mother? Why is the fox now in me? Ieyasu sighed, I wasn't given the full details, but someone attacked you while you were being born. He used the moment of weakness of your mother to free Kyuubi and spread havoc across Konoha. To keep Konoha safe, your father sacrificed himself to seal the Kyuubi into you. My father sealed the Kyuubi into me. But I thought it was. Naruto trailed off as his face got pale with shock. Yondaime. The Yondaime is my father. Namek is Minato, the yellow flash, Kyosu confirmed. He couldn't ask another family to sacrifice their child if wasn't willing to do it himself. He also trusted that you'd be able to handle the beast and that you would be taken care of. As you know yourself, however, only the former came to reality. Naruto was in tears by this point and Kyosu put a comforting hand on the boy's head. I know it's a lot to take in, Naruto, Kyosu said in a gentle voice that was very contrasting to the essence he gave off, but there's still more. Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and nodded. Kyosu took a deep breath, I take it you've heard of the Rakuto Sennin, correct? Naruto blinked, you mean that myth about the founder of ninjutsu? It's no myth, boy, Kyosu said seriously. The Rakuto Sennin did indeed exist. He fought the being known as the Juubi and became the first Jinchuriki. Towards the end of his life he split the Juubi into 9 parts, whom you know today as the 9. Naruto gasped slightly. I am not done yet. The Rakuto Sennin is the ancestor of the Uzumaki clan, as well as the ancestor of the Senju and Uchiha clans. Naruto gaped in utter shock, I'm related to the Rakuto Sennin. Wait. I am related to Tsunadebichin in the temple. Distant to the latter but yes. Naruto didn't know whether or not to be disturbed, excited, or both. Naruto slowly laid back down, I think I need time to process this. Not yet, Naruto. I am not done. Naruto looked at him strangely and then sarcastically asked, what are you going to tell me I'm the direct descendant of the Rakuto Sennin next? Well, you are but that wasn't what I was going to say, Naruto looked at him with his mouth dropped. He was the original Kami no Shinobi's direct descendant, yet that wasn't the important thing Kyosu was going to tell him, then what was? It's actually the reason why I took you away and brought you here. It is to train you. Naruto gasped and looked at him, you want to train me? But why? Ieyasu pointed at Naruto and said the line that would change Naruto's world forever, simple, you are the Rakuto Sennin reborn. You are his reincarnation. You and the Sennin and one in the same person. Silence. Dead silence filled the room. That is until Naruto shouted out at the top of his lungs, I'm what? Jiraiya was quickly making his way through Hai no Kuni trying to find whatever trace of his godson that he could when he stopped. Was that Naruto's voice? Jiraiya asked himself. He could have sworn he had heard his godson's distant voice somewhere. Seemed like it came from the north. What am I doing? I've got to continue my search. With that, Jiraiya took off again. Despite the pain, Naruto was in Kyosu's face shouting at the top of his lungs, what do you mean I am the Rakuto Sennin's reincarnation? Kyosu's face was blank, first, sit down and shut up, kid. Second, I mean exactly that. You're the Rakuto Sennin reborn unto this world. But how is this possible? Look, kid, I am Yami's harbinger, not Yami himself. He didn't tell me that, however, he did tell me to awaken the memories of your past life and then train you to match your predecessor. Why would the god of darkness want to help me? I don't know, Kyosu said. I did hear him mumble something along the lines of damn Kami, but that's pretty much it. Naruto's sweat dropped. He had never seen someone act as casually as he was talking about Yami. Hell, few people ever really did talk about those deities now that he thought about it. His train of thought was derailed when Kyosu spoke up, now, to unlock those memories of yours. I am going to get the Sennin's memories. And his as well. His Dojutsu. The Rinnegan, the eyes of God. Awesome. I am going to be the world's greatest shinobi. Naruto shot up in true Naruto fashion, but collapsed again after his brief speech due to the pain. Kyosu deadpanned, kid, I thought I told you to sit still and be quiet. Sorry, Naruto shrunk under the harbinger's gaze. Now, let us begin, Kyosu said as he put his middle and index finger on Naruto's forehead and slowly shut his eyes to concentrate. 3 months later. Shinra Tensei. Naruto shouted and an invisible force shot Kyosu back quite a ways before he managed to catch readied his preferred weapon, a bastard meaning one or two-handed scythe, before he shot forward in a zigzag fashion, making him a much harder target to hit. Naruto smirked as his Rinnegan gazed at his sensei. Bansho Tenin. Kyosu suddenly felt himself being pulled toward his student who was now reading it to shove into his face. He, however, took advantage of this and began to swing his scythe down at the boy. Naruto quickly jumped backwards to avoid the swing just as his master flew past him. He rebounded, preparing to use his against his Darkied sensei. When he thrust his at Kyosu, it connected instead with the pole of the scythe. The two were locked in the duel between scythe and before Naruto allowed them to go critical and release its torrent of energy. Both fighters were forced back yet both remained standing. They stared at each other intently before they both laughed to themselves. "Well, that certainly was fun," Naruto said to his sensei. "Indeed, you actually managed to give me a hard time while using so few attacks. That's impressive. Thank you, Kasu-sensei. I am pleased to say that there is little else I can prepare you for. You chose only 4 moves to use against my full arsenal and did a very good job of fending me off. You have a master of the 5 basic elements and the Kurama is by your side. You truly are the Sennin reborn. Thanks, Kasu-sensei." Kyosu shook his head, the sensei is no longer needed. "I work for you now, Rakuto-sama." Kyosu bowed. Naruto blinked in surprise but returned the bow. Naruto owed everything that had happened recently to Kyosu. When the man had unsealed the memories of his past life, it was like he had reached enlightenment. Flashback. "Now, let us begin," Kyosu said as he put his middle and index finger on Naruto's forehead and slowly shut his eyes to concentrate. At first nothing happened, but then a shockwave of pain and memories shot through Naruto's skull at what seemed like the speed of life. He saw the sage's childhood. He saw the sage's training. He saw the sage's techniques. He saw the sage's fight with the Juubi. He saw the sage's wedding. He saw the sage's sons. He saw the sage's elderly days. He saw the sage's mourning of the loss of his wife. And he saw the sage's last words to the new 9 Biju before the old man had passed on. All these memories and more flashed through Naruto's mind. It felt like thousands upon thousands of shadow clones exploding at once. It was insane. Suddenly his eyes began to burn, but he couldn't move. He could shout out in pain. He could only sit there staring at Yami's harbinger on earth. Despite the intense pain, he also felt bliss. It was as if a piece of his being had been returned to him. As if he was being made whole once again. Kyosu then removed his hand from Naruto's forehead. Naruto's head looked down, and his hand went to his chance as he tried to catch his breath. "You okay, kid?" Kyosu asked. "Yeah, just give me a moment." After a few moments, Naruto took one deep breath. "Okay, I'm fine now." Naruto looked up and opened his eyes, but immediately had to blink a couple of times. What's with this vision? I see things so much clearer than before. Hey, the faded black stuff around your body, is that your chakra? Kyosu shrugged, probably. Why is it black? Harbinger of Yami, god of darkness, remember? Oh, yeah right. There was a silence for a minute before Kyosu spoke. "So, kid." Naruto looked up, "How do you feel?" Naruto thought a minute before he answered, "I don't know. All these memories. It's very overwhelming. There are so many techniques yet I feel like I already can do them." "Well, technically you can but your body isn't prepared for them yet. Your mind is but your body isn't. That's where I come in. I shall train you so that you can use the Rakuto Sennin's techniques without hindering yourself." Naruto fist bumped in the air, "Awesome. By the way, what do I look like?" Kyosu smiled, "See for yourself." Kyosu pulled out a mirror from where Kami knew where and showed it to Naruto. Naruto blinked a couple of times before rubbing his eyes. He leaned forward to get a closer look. No longer were his eyes a charming blue. Now they were a purplish hue with 6 rings extending from the pupil of his eye. Naruto gaped, "Wow, it looks awesome. Dadabeo." Kyosu laughed at the boy's antics. Their laugh was interrupted by the sound of Naruto's stomach growling. Naruto looked down at his stomach and Kyosu looked at Naruto. Naruto scratched the back of his head as he grinned sheepishly. Got anything to eat?" "Yes. Got any ramen?" Kyosu shrugged, "I'll see what we have." "So, I think you are ready for some real shinobi training," Kyosu stated. "And unfortunately that's not my forte. So I've gathered the 6 paths you shall use. Each one is in class shinobi, so they can help you with your elemental and shinobi training." Naruto was surprised but nodded. He knew very well that Kyosu's training was only to prepare his body for the techniques utilized by the Rakuto Sennin through his memories. In all reality he hadn't had any shinobi training in 3 months, as Kyosu wasn't in fact a shinobi other than he could tree walk and water walk. Though he was very curious who his 6 paths were going to be. He mentioned his desire to finally utilize the 6 paths, and Kyosu took him to where 6 coffins were in Yuzashiogakur. Naruto looked at Kyosu with a raised eyebrow. The older man just shrugged, "It's a surprise." Naruto sighed and sent his chakra into the 6 bodies hidden from him. When the bodies gained life and the coffin doors fell open, Naruto gasped. Before him were Shodai, Nidame, Sandame, and Yondame Hokages, including 2 retired women he didn't immediately recognize. What surprised him even more was how they all collapsed gasping for breath. "What the heck just happened?" the Shodai Hokage asked. He was the first to stand up. "And why do I have 7 fields of vision?" "I don't know," answered his brother. "But perhaps these two know." The 6 formerly dead Kija-level shinobi blinked as they saw who was in front of him. 2 of them gasped. They walked towards the 2 and bent down to Naruto's level. "Naruto?" they struggled to say. Naruto just smiled. "Hello Itaosan, Akasan." Tears built up in the 3 of their eyes. "Naruto." Minato and Kushina jolted forward and hugged their son as tight as they could. Naruto did the same to his parents. The other 4 paths were starting to get an idea of what was going on but were still very lost. "Naruto," Minato asked. "How are we here? Where are we? And what the hell happened to your eyes?" "Don't you mean our eyes, Itaosan?" Naruto asked smirking. They all blinked and looked at each other. They quickly realized they all had the same eyes as well as metal piercings sticking out of their skin across their bodies. I'm pretty sure I speak for everyone here when I ask what exactly is going on here." Mito spoke and everyone nodded. Naruto pointed at his one-time sensei, "Ask him." They all looked at the cloak man before he smiled. "Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mahatsukai Kyosu. I am the mortal harbinger of Yami, the god of darkness." All 6 gasped slightly in shock. Hiruzen was the first one to recover and say, "You are the harbinger of Yami?" Kyosu nodded, "Yes, I am." They all looked at each other. Hashirama decided to say, "So what are we doing here?" "Well, you see, let me explain." About 1 hour later. "Okay, let me see if I've got this," Minato said. All 6 ex-Konoha shinobi were sitting in a semicircle around Kyosu and Naruto. "We have been chosen to be the 6 paths for the reincarnation of the Rakuto Sennin, who is my son, and we are to train him in more advanced shinobi ways and in the elemental arts to help him grow to be as strong as his predecessor. And my son was abused by the village, ignoring my husband's final request to keep my baby boy safe." Kushina continued glaring at Hiruzen, who was sweating profusely. The old saying was indeed true. "Hell hath no fury like that of a woman's scorn." "It's not the old man's fault," Kushina Kyosu stated, gaining the attention of the others. "I have visited Konoha on many occasions since I picked up Naruto as a student. Ever since the Kyuubi attack, the civilian council has bid for more and more power. To this day they've gained enough to equal the Shinobi Council and the Hokage herself." Most of them just groaned and shook their heads. Hashirama sighed. "It appears as if Konoha is slowly losing its will of fire. And hopefully we can stop that and return the will of fire to the village," Naruto said. The others nodded. "Now on to other business," Tobirama spoke. "You mentioned that we each have different abilities due to our separate paths. What are they?" Naruto smirked and nodded his head. "Well, Itaosan, you are the Diva path. You have control over gravity." Minato nodded. "Akasan, you are the animal path. You have the ability to summon any animal, no contracts required." "Sweet," she said, smirking. "Mito-san, you are the Asura path. You have the ability to summon and use any weapon you can imagine." Mito smirked and nodded. "Tobirama-san, you are the human path. You have the ability to read people's minds and tear their souls from their bodies." "I see," the former Hokage said as he thought this over. "Hashirama-san, you are the pre-top path. You have the ability to absorb any and all chakra attacks." "So, ninjutsu is useless against me?" Hashirama asked, amused. Naruto nodded and the Shodai grinned. "That's useful." "And Jujutsu, you are the Naraka path. You have the ability to summon the King of Hell." Hiruzen cocked his eyebrow. "The King of Hell?" "Yes, with the King of Hell you are allowed to interrogate people. You can tell if they are telling the truth or lying and have their souls devoured by him if they lie. You also have the ability to revive the other paths should they ever be defeated for whatever reason. So the Kami no Shinobi is the path we need to keep alive at all times, huh?" Minato asked, smirking. "That shouldn't be too hard." They all laughed. Naruto turned to his ex-sensei and asked, "Hey Kyosu-sensei." "Kyosu-san," Naruto Kyosu sighed. "I'm not your sensei anymore." "Fine, Kyosu-san, but is it okay if I go to practice my stealth on a bit of a mission before I begin my training?" The others look at him strangely. "What do you have in mind, Rakuto-sama?" Kyosu asked, saying Naruto's title sort of playfully. Naruto ignored his sensei's jibe and smirked and said, "I just want to see how my former home is doing." Onahagakure. Once the greatest of the 5 great shinobi villages, Konoha had fallen on incredibly hard times. Since Naruto's kidnapping, things had gone into an economic depression. After the retrieval mission, word had spread quickly of Naruto's disappearance. But while most of the shinobi did see the seriousness of Naruto's kidnapping and had even started seeing him as Naruto and not the demon he held, the civilians were a completely different matter. They were happy he was gone. That the demon could no longer attempt to hurt them in any way. They threw parties and the like and celebrated that the demon brat was now gone. Many of the shinobi were in disgust. Not only was Naruto not the demon, he held the demon back on a daily basis. Even more so, even after the villagers made his childhood a living hell, Naruto still found it in himself to save their lives during the Oto and Suna invasion and to fight the Uchiha brat to get him back into the village. And this was how they repaid him. The Konoha 11, or those who respected Naruto among the Konoha 11, were easily the most brutal against the villagers who celebrated Naruto's disappearance. Even Shikamaru would put in the effort to stop the civilians. Unfortunately for Konoha, the celebrations of their young hero's disappearance didn't go unnoticed by its allies. Suna, Spring, Wave, and T-Nations, after hearing what Konoha populace did to the one person who made them their allies, cut off trade with Konoha and unanimously agreed to trade with each other for resources. The blow crippled Konoha. The god Aim Hokage, Senju Tsunade, was busy with the Great Cage paperwork curse. Everyone in Konoha had been working overtime day in and day out for the past 3 months to make up for budget cuts made by their daimyo. Despite this, Tsunade still always smirked at the thought of their feudal lord's visit. Simply remembering the fire daimyo tearing the civilian council a new one always made her grin. Flashback about 2 months earlier. The civilians were very nervous and were uncontrollably shifting under the gaze of the fire daimyo, who was glaring at them with pure hate. The gaze of the Hokage and the Shinobi Council was comforting in comparison, and they weren't exactly smiling. Well, the Hokage was, but it was more like a haha, you're fucked grin. So, let me just tell you what your actions have caused, the daimyo said in a very calm but very unnerving voice. Suna, Spring, Wave, and T have all ended trade with us. The council was in an instant uproar. What? Why would they do that? We have treaties. They can't do this. We should show them why we are the greatest shinobi village. Silence. Daimyo shouted out furiously. The entire civilian council shut up instantly. The shinobi council was shaking their heads. Their civilian counterparts were only making things worse. The daimyo pointed at the civilian side and shouted, "This is all your fault." The council shrunk in fear of their lord. One council member managed to squeak out, "Our fault." "Yes. Your damn fault." The daimyo roared. The council seemed like an infant compared to that of their feudal lord. Tsunade smirked. They were squirming and she was enjoying every minute of it. "Serves you right, bastards," she thought. "Because of you and the civilians you represent, these nations have cut off all trade with US." Daimyo shouted, still downright furious. "My lord," Danzo spoke up. "What is it? What is it that we've done to gain such hate from our allies?" Danzo said calmly. "I don't recall doing anything against them." "It's not what you fools did to them," Tsunade spoke, glaring at them. "It's what you did to the one person who convinced them to ally with us." "And who is this person we have disrespected?" "One Uzumaki Naruto, whom you've been celebrating the kidnapping of for the past couple weeks." There was a stunned silence from the civilian council. They were gaping with eyes wide. Tsunade began to count down in her mind, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. "What? They turned us away because we celebrated the removal of the demon. This is outrageous. That demon doesn't deserve anything for what we've suffered." Silence. Daimyo's voice rumbled with ungodly fury. From the size of an infant, the council shrunk to the size of ants. They were cowering with fear. Their feudal lord seemed angry enough to have them all executed in the most ungodly, painful way possible. "That demon is the only reason we are allies with the Wave, Spring, and T. That demon was the one who defeated the One-Tails and convinced him to leave the battle. That demon is the only thing keeping the Kyuubi no Kitsune at bay, and yet you kami damn civilians kept abusing him. What if one of those time of abuse the demon escaped? No one would have been able to stop it. You would have brought up on yourselves your own destruction." The shinobi in the room didn't know whether the civilians were silent because of their lord's speech, because they were ashamed, or because they were terrified. But most of them really didn't care. "I am cutting Konoha's budget," the daimyo proclaimed. "This is to make up for the loss of income we have had. Also, because the civilians are the cause of all this, they shall have their taxes tripled to help pay for things Konoha needs to survive." "My lord," a councilman exclaimed, shocked. "You can't be serious." "Did I stutter?" the daimyo rhetorically asked, and with a very cold gaze at the man who dared question him. Daimyo took a deep breath and stated, "Now, let's continue with our next subject. The Uchiha traitor." The civilian council paled and many cried on the inside. Most felt their wallets get significantly lighter. But all of them knew that this day was going to get a hell of a lot worse for them all. "Serves you all right, you bastards," Tsunade thought, snickering to herself. The civilians were struggling to make ends meet due to the taxes imposed on them by the daimyo. It seemed karma was back with a vengeance, though from Tsunade's perspective, it still had a long way to go before it was done. As for what happened to the Uchiha, it pretty much enraged and horrified the council, not that she cared. The Uchiha had his chakra and Sharingan sealed for 6 months, and for that same amount of time he was under house arrest. His only visitors were those he had gotten permission from the Hokage herself. Naturally, he received very few. She sighed to herself. Despite the civilians' position under the great hatred of their daimyo, they still somehow managed to be able to pull the strings in Konoha. She suspected the elders Danzo, Kaharu, and Homura had something to do with it, but she didn't have any physical evidence. And she couldn't do anything without evidence. She groaned as she was about to get back to her paperwork, but she thanked Kami as a knock came from the door. Yes? She asked and Shizune entered. What is it, Shizune? We've just received a message from Jiraiya-sama. And what is it? Tsunade asked, hiding her anxiousness. One of Jiraiya-sama's spies has reported seeing a man that matches the description Kakashi gave us buying supplies in Wave Country. Tsunade was instantly on her feet. What? Where'd he go after that? Apparently, he stayed at an inn in the settlement he was at, but was gone by morning, with only a thank you note and some extra money for the room. Tsunade sat back down and rubbed her chin and thought, Anbu. They appeared instantly beside Shizune. Yes, Hikage-sama. Tell Shikaku, Kakashi, and Tsume that I want them here now. I want their opinions on this. Hi, Hikage-sama, they replied before vanishing. Naruto, we're finally on your trail, Tsunade whispered to herself, hoping to calm herself that somehow it wasn't too late. Hyuga Hinata was slowly making her way through Konoha. She still thought about Naruto. She hoped Kami was alright. She and her comrades had changed over the last couple of months. The Konoha 12 was now the Konoha 10, at least until Sasuke was allowed back into the shinobi force, which she and many of her comrades were not going to be happy about. The members of Konoha 12, or as it once had been, who respected Naruto's sacrifices and what he put up with, had all trained very hard to be able to surpass their senseis. They knew that if the kidnapper could oust Kakashi as easily they did, they knew they'd have to be significantly stronger to beat him. Even Shikamaru had put in some effort into training, though he still complained a lot. He was getting that much closer to beating his father in shogi, and his old man was very impressed. He had even done some negotiations with Sana and had managed to convince the Kazekage to still allow Konoha shinobi to enter Suna. Shikamaru had commented that that's as good as it's going to get for now. Hinata herself had changed the most over the past 3 months. She was more determined than all her comrades in the Konoha 10 to get Naruto back if there was any hope for it being possible. She trained very hard, even asking Lee and Neji for some help. Her confidence had soared, determination to live up to Naruto's level of confidence swelled in her eyes. She even visited Ichiraku Ramen rather often and had become good friends with the 2 cooks who had been so nice to Naruto in the past. She sighed as she continued on through the village towards the training grounds. She could never stop thinking about the missing crush and she never wanted to. She whispered quietly to herself, Naruto, please be alright. Outside the gate, 2 figures approached. One was a young man with long black hair and with bandages over his eyes. He had a cane he used as a walking stick. The other was a young boy wearing shades and a bandana that covered his hair. He also had a coat covering the bottom half of his face. When they reached the gates they were stopped by the gate guards. What is your business in Konoha? Just passing through, the man with bandages over his eyes. He looked at the guard only after he had spoken. We'll be gone by tomorrow. The guard nodded, but the other looked at him strangely. Why are your eyes bandaged? My Ajusan was born without eyes, the boy said speaking. We can't afford the artificial ones. And you, boy, what's your excuse? Suffered really bad burns as a kid. Horribly scarring my body. The one guard looked ready to retort, but his comrade stopped him. Leave them alone, Kitetsu, they're fine. The guard looked at them, forgive my partner for asking so many questions. You must write your names down, and then we can let you through. The 2 nodded and the young man and the boy wrote their names down. Nisamono Toshiro and Nisamono Kiji respectively. The 2 guards let them by, and the duo thanked them. When they had left Kitetsu turned to his best friend, didn't they look the least bit suspicious to you? They did. That's why when Sandame's grandson and his team arrived to pick the paper up, I told him to inform the Hokage. There wasn't any shinobi I could inform otherwise. Kitetsu nodded at the answer and grumbled as they got back to working on guarding the gate. After they had passed the guards the boy looked at the man, told you we didn't need to resort to a henge or to your dark stealth. Yeah, I know. I owe you 100 yen now, Kyosu grumbled as he used his other senses to continue to walk. But don't you think that they are suspicious of us now? Maybe, but we'll be gone before they have the chance to investigate us. Fine, you go find your friends. I have a date with the Hokage to keep. Isn't it bad enough that Arasenin wants to date Bachin? Naruto asked, looking at him. Kyosu deadpanned. It's an expression, kid. Yeah, a bad one. But that Naruto walked down a different street. Kyosu sighed and shook his head, damn kid. But that, Kyosu continued down the path towards the Hokage tower. Naruto, still in disguise, walked down the crowded streets of Konoha. He was looking around and so far not much had changed. He thought about going to Ichiraku, but decided that wouldn't be a good idea because that could lead to people discovering who he was and, as much as he wanted to, couldn't do that just yet. He still had a lot of training to do before then. Just as he finished his musings he came upon some of his old friends. Neji, Kiba, Choji, and Shikamaru. They were sitting down at a table outside a small restaurant. Naruto decided to listen in. He got as close as he could as casually as he could and focused his hearing towards the conversation. So Jiraiya really got a lead on the guy who kidnapped Naruto? Choji asked. Yeah, Shikamaru answered. Kakashi-sensei, my father, and Kiba's mother were all called to the Hokage's office. Oh, smooth one, Kyosu, Naruto thought, groaning inwardly. Way to keep a low profile. Have you told Hinata yet? Neji asked. Shikamaru shook his head, haven't seen her today. Naruto's eyes narrowed, why would she care about this kind of information? She was so shy, especially around me. Where do you think she is anyway? Choji asked. Probably training I would think, Kiba answered. She wants to be ready when it's time to face the guy who kidnapped Naruto. Kidnapper, huh? Naruto smirked to himself. I'll have to use that as a nickname for Kyosu now. She truly does love him, doesn't she? Choji asked rhetorically. Naruto's eyes widened at that and he intently listened in for the answer. Yes, she loves that done so much she's willing to train to the extent that Gai-sensei trains us to get him back, Neji answered. It's too bad she could never bring herself to confess to that oblivious baka without fainting. Yeah, Kiba smiled sadly. Naruto was stunned. Hinata. She loved me. No, she still loves me. Despite what her family has told her, she still loves me. Naruto walked down an alley and dropped his disguise. He then raced off to find the Hyuga heiress, keeping himself well hidden from all eyes as he did so. Hinata, I'm so sorry I was such a baka, Naruto thought to himself. I will make it up now. I promise. Naruto looked ahead as he approached the training grounds, and Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto never breaks a promise. At the training grounds, Hinata was about to begin with stamina training when she heard someone land behind her. She turned around and activated her Byakugan, who's there. She could see the intruder's chakra. It seemed so familiar but was heavily suppressed, which surprised her. When she got no answer she shouted out, I know you're there, there's no use in hiding. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and she gasped. There before her was Naruto. He was no longer in his kimono jumpsuit but was now in orange and white training gear with a white haori over it. But Naruto's eyes were the biggest difference. They were no longer blue, but were now violet with 6 rings rippling out of the center. She couldn't move. She was just too surprised by this. However, she did manage to stutter out, Naruto. He smiled warmly at her, hello Hinata-chan. I know you're there, there's no use in hiding. The figure stepped out of the shadows, and she gasped. There before her was Naruto. He was no longer in his kimono jumpsuit but was now in orange and white training gear with a white haori over it. But Naruto's eyes were the biggest difference. They were no longer blue, but were now violet with 6 rings rippling out of the center. She couldn't move. She was just too surprised by this. However, she did manage to stutter out, Naruto. He smiled warmly at her, hello Hinata-chan. Hinata was in shock. Her longtime crush. No, love was standing right before her. Hinata instantly went back to her stuttering at the sight of him, Naruto. How is it possible? Kakashi-sensei said you were kidnapped. Naruto put hand to chin and spoke out loud of his playful musings, well, I wouldn't call it kidnapping really. Kasu-sensei really only took me so that I could live out my true calling. What? Hinata asked confused. You weren't kidnapped. Kasu-sensei. True calling. Naruto, what are you talking about? Naruto grinned, first Hinata, lose the stutter. You sounded cuter without it. Hinata was cherry red at that statement, did he just call me cute? We'll try, Naruto. Call me, Naruto-kun, Hinata-chan. Chan, did he just call me Chan? Wait, did he just ask me to call him Kun? Hinata nodded and took a deep breath and said, how is the Naruto-kun? Naruto shook his head smiling, it's good enough for now. Naruto smiled at her and sat down on the grass. He patted the ground next to her and she sat down next to him. Now answering your questions. No, I wasn't kidnapped per se, though now I'm going to be using that to tease Kasu-sensei, Naruto snickered to himself. Hinata blinked, who's Kasu-sensei? Hey, Hinata-chan, your stutter's gone. Naruto laughed and Hinata's face melted into a darker red if that was at all possible. But to answer your question, Kasu-sensei is the one who took me. He was the one who took you, Hinata asked. Why? To help me become what I was meant to be, Hinata looked at them both strangely and with a hint of worry. What do you mean, Naruto-kun? Naruto took a deep breath, you know the old story of the Rakuto Sennin. Hinata nodded, you mean the old myth of the founder of ninjutsu? It's no myth, Hinata. Hinata's eyes widened in surprise, what? There's more Hinata, Naruto said looking at her seriously. Have you noticed the change in my eyes? Yes, Hinata nodded. What happened? What are they? These are used by the Rakuto Sennin, Naruto explained. The Rinnegan. What? Hinata said surprised. Naruto's hand quickly went over her mouth and he whispered, SHH, Hinata. I don't want anyone to know I'm here. Please quiet down. Hinata nodded but asked, Naruto. How do you have the eyes of the Rakuto Sennin? Naruto took another deep breath before speaking, because Hinata, I am the Rakuto Sennin reborn. Rakuto Sennin and I are one in the same person. Aosu had managed to get out of his disguise and was using his shadow stealth technique to glide across the floor of the Hokage Tower as a mere faded shadow. He didn't move rapidly so as to not draw attention, but he slowly made it into the Hokage's office. He hid next to the door. He took special note of where everyone in the room was: the Hokage herself, her assistant, the three present, and the Anbu hidden within the office itself. I'm in luck, he thought. They are just starting the meeting. I'm surprised you showed up on time, Hitaka-san, Tsunade commented, slightly amused. You mentioned it had to do with Naruto so I came as quickly as I could, the Kapanen answered. Kyosu blinked. What? So, what is it you need from us, Hikage-sama? Inuyasukatsu asked. I need your opinions on something, Gadim answered. Something very important. Troublesome, Shikaku grunted, earning a glare from the three women in the room. Ignoring the comment, Kakashi spoke up. And what would that be, Hikage-sama? Recently, one of Jiraiya's spies spotted the man Kakashi saw taking Naruto, which instantly got everyone's attention. It especially got Kyosu's attention, who was wittied at the very prospect of being discovered. What? Where is he? Kakashi asked desperately. In his mind, he was overjoyed that he finally had a chance to redeem himself, Naruto. I hope it's not too late. I need to apologize for what I've done. For neglecting you, for not being able to save you, and for not protecting you when your teammates went too far. No, when you return I will treat you as I should have as a sensei. Not to mention preventing Sasuke and Sakura from attacking you after beating the Uchiha brat down. It was true, neither Sasuke or Sakura had really changed much since Naruto's kidnapping. Sasuke was enraged that he didn't get away and of the treatment he was getting as the last Uchiha, namely being sealed and placed under house arrest. He didn't care that Naruto had been taken and the rest of the Konoha 11, as he refused to call it Konoha 10, since he still considered himself the best of them, refused to do anything involving the Uchiha heir. All of them except for Sakura, that is. Sakura hadn't changed her view on Naruto. She was willing to let him stay kidnapped and let Kami know whatever was happening to him would continue as long as she had the damn Uchiha brat by her side. Consequently, Kakashi, disgusted by the fact that they had completely let their teammate to rot, refused to train them any longer and, with Tsunade's permission, was allowed to dissolve Team 7. Needless to say, the civilian council, the Harunos and the Uchiha were not very happy. Kakashi didn't care and said that he wasn't going to train them and to find somebody else. They did just that. They had found a loyal to the civilian side to train Sakura and Sasuke once he was out from under house arrest. Kakashi nowadays was either helping the other teams train from time to time, substituting for their senseis, or tagging along on their missions as an extra set of hands. How this happened was when most of the Konoha 10, as he continually called it to irritate the council, proclaimed their desire to grow stronger to be able to help defeat the man who kidnapped Naruto. He knew that he now needed to make sure they were ready. The guy had given him a guy-like strike without touching him and in the same instant managed to evade him so well it was as if he never existed. They would need all the strength they could get. The other senseis and their teams welcomed Kakashi's training with open arms, even though he was still always about an hour or two late. He was seen gathering supplies in a small settlement in the wave. He vanished before daybreak, however, Tsunade answered, letting the information sink in. Kyosu on the other hand was inwardly groaning, Kami, damn it. I hate spies when they're used on me. When Naruto hears this he's never going to let me live it down. Ever. So, Kakashi's face dropped in disappointment. You still don't know where he is. Not exactly, Tsunade confirmed. However, two of you are our best trackers and one of you is our best strategist. I want you to put your heads together to see if you can come up with a general area that could be based on the information we know about him. The three were silent for a minute as they thought. Kakashi was the first person to speak. Well, based on my encounter with him, I have to say he is nigh untraceable if he doesn't want to be found. So us finding him probably means he's leading us somewhere. No, Kyosu mentally cried in the anime. I just fucked up. So you're implying he might be based in the wave? Shikaku asked. Or it could be a trap he's setting up, Tsun pointed out. Kakashi and Shikaku hemmed in the analysis. That was a legit point. The man had proven to have been a match for Kakashi, or even more than a match for the Kapanen, due to how unimpressed he was when they first met. Shikaku then brought something else up. What exactly did he buy anyway? A lot apparently, Shizune answered. It's a long list. So, he's either been doing a lot of high-rank missions and bounty for one of the nations, Tsunade deduced. Or he's being funded by someone. Kyosu smiled mentally, Yami pays his harbingers well. Would you mind reading the list? Shikaku asked. The others looked at him curiously, wondering why that would matter, but decided just to go along with it. Shizune pulls out the list and begins reading it. 100 slabs of stone from the local quarry, 100 blocks of iron from the local forge, 50 planks of wood from the local lumber mill. Well paid, indeed, Kyosu inwardly snickered. It's pretty much the same thing the rest of the way down. It's really just materials for building and crafting until we reach food which includes but is not limited to chicken, beef, breads, and Shizun's eyes widened at the last one, which got Tsunade's and the other women's attention. And what Shizune-san? Shikaku asked. And Raymond. Balsam saw this as a token of interest. Shikaku himself shrugged it off, could be he just likes variety. Shizune deadpanned, yes, Shikaku-san, because we all know that 50 packets of instant ramen goes well with seasoned chicken and rice. The others blinked in surprise at this revelation. Kyosu sighed inwardly, knew that kid's ramen addiction would have consequences, but no, taking away his ramen puts him into a berserk fit of rage. Hopefully his parents can keep him in line now. So either this man has a ramen addiction that can match Naruto. Kakashi began. No way in hell. Kyosu's sweat dropped. Or Naruto is still alive and is being taken care of. And this is my cue, Kyosu thought as the shadow quickly formed himself leaning on the wall next to the door. I can vouch for that. The inhabitants of the room instantly jolted to face him. Kakashi recognized him immediately and got ready to fight. You were the one who kidnapped Naruto. Upon hearing this, the other inhabitants joined Kakashi in a fighting stance. Even the Anbu appeared from their various hiding spots with weapons ready. To their surprise the man looked up at the ceiling and put his hands behind his head. What surprised them more was the nonchalant musing he spoke to seemingly no one. I wouldn't exactly call it a kidnapping. I like to call it necessary intervention. I don't care what you call it, Tsunade said in a very low and dangerous tone. You took the shinobi of Konoha away. You are going to spend some time in the interrogation and torture department until you tell us where he is. Oh please, Kyosu scoffed. 1. Your interrogation and torture department doesn't scare me. Trust me. My Greek grandmother is scarier. Kyosu involuntarily shivered at the last part. 2. I evaded Mr. Cyclops here in a split second. What makes you think the same would happen here? 3rd. Naruto is fine. In fact, the boy's better than fine. He's improving by leaps and bounds since I picked him up. 4. Why should I bring him back if the village doesn't want him? You lie. Kakashi shouted. The boy is well respected by Konoha. He belongs here. Kyosu's eyes narrowed, yes, because your populace made that so clear after they had learned he was gone. That struck a nerve in all of them. They felt guilty and rightfully so. What he said was true. Kyosu wasn't done, however. Don't think Naruto hasn't heard about what they did. All the parties and such. He knows full well what has gone on here. However, he is also aware of how many of the shinobi did stand up for him, and believe me when I say he does appreciate that. They didn't know whether or not to be ashamed or relieved. Tsunade, Shizune, and Kakashi were fighting back tears at the man's words. Somehow, they knew what he was saying was true. Naruto is doing very well, however, due to recent events he can't reveal himself to you just yet. Believe me, he wants to, but he knows now is not the time. There was a pause before Kakashi asked, when can we see him again? Kyosu thought a moment before he said, for those who wish to see him go to the ruins of Yuzushiogakure exactly 2 years from today. Their eyes widened. They were in Yuzushio this whole time. How did they manage that? The place was crawling with traps and the like. And Sanada-sama. Tsunade snapped out of her thoughts when she heard her name and looked at the man. Naruto wanted me to pass this message on to you, and I am saying this verbatim. I'm okay, Bachan. Don't worry about me. We'll see each other again soon. And please know that even though I didn't know you long, I sort of saw a mother-like figure in you. Tsunade sat back into her chair. She couldn't fight back the tears any longer. Those words held so much meaning. She knew the man was telling the truth. Thank you, mister. She paused, realizing she had never gotten his name. She looked at him and he smiled, right. My name is Kyosu. Mahatsukai Kyosu. I am the harbinger of Yami, the god of darkness. But that, Kyosu vanished, leaving the inhabitants of the room stunned one last time before leaving. Tsunade was the first to recover and cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. This is to be In's class secret that never leaves this room. If Naruto wants to remain hidden for now, so be it. Also, Shizune, I want a message sent out to Jiraiya. Tell him I want him back here now. He's currently in the town Kyosu was last spotted at. The others nodded. Tsunade took a deep breath. Now could you all leave? I need a minute alone. They all complied. After they had all left, Tsunade began to cry. She only thought of one thing, Naruto. Hinata was looking at Naruto with complete and utter shock. She had just been told that her long-time love was the Rakuto Sennin's reincarnation, Naruto-kun. I were the Rakuto Sennin. Stuttering, Hinata-chan, Naruto said, reminding her pleasantly. But yes, I am Rakuto Sennin. Or his reincarnation at least. I have recently received all the memories of my past life and know all his techniques. I have spent the last 3 months getting my body prepared to be able to handle his or my techniques. Man, this whole reincarnation thing is confusing. Hinata was gaping. She couldn't believe it, yet the proof was right there in front of her. She finally managed to find her voice after a minute or two. Have you told the others yet? Naruto smiled sadly at her, no. In fact, I wasn't even supposed to reveal myself as of yet. Hinata's eyes widened again, what? Why? Because I need to stay hidden to train. I have to be ready to fully take up the mantle of the Rakuto Sennin before I reveal myself as his reincarnation to the world. Don't get me wrong, the last 3 months have made me a lot stronger with the Sennin's memories and techniques and all, but I haven't had any real shinobi training in 3 months and I need to train in that area for a long time before I'm at the level worthy of the Sennin. Do understand, Naruto-kun, Hinata said. She then did probably the boldest move of her life. She leaned up against him and held his arm close to her body. Naruto blinked in surprise, but he relaxed a few short seconds afterward. They sat there a while before Hinata decided to speak. Naruto-kun, Hinata whispered. To know what's sealed inside you. Hinata felt Naruto's body tense at this information, but before he could say anything she got up and stared right at his eyes. Her face was but inches from his. The entire Konoha 12 knows, or what's left of it. And we don't care about Naruto. In fact, we respect you so much more for what you've been through. You protected us every single day and had the perseverance to stick it through, despite what those ungrateful villagers had done. I admire you, Naruto-kun. More than you'll ever know. Naruto was silent for a while. He was stunned, they know about the fox and they don't hate me? I can't believe I doubted them. Then Naruto remembered exactly why he came to find her in the first place. You admire me, Hinata-chan. Don't you mean you love me? Hinata froze. Naruto noted that her face went a darker shade of red than his Akasan's hair. Hinata put her 2 index fingers together and managed to squeak out, how did I find dude? Naruto smiled, I overheard Neji, Shikamaru, Kiba and Choji talking about it when I was in disguise earlier and I listened in on their conversation. It's the only reason I'm talking with you right now. Hinata and Naruto were silent for a moment before Naruto looked at Hinata apologetically, I'm sorry for being so dense and not noticing it. I hope you can forgive me and that somehow I can make it up to you. Hinata managed to muster her courage up for a reply, of course to forgive you, Naruto-kun. I could never hate you. And you don't have to make it up to me. Naruto thought for a moment then smirked, I want to think and I think I know how to start making it up to you, Hinata-chan. With that, Naruto quickly leaned forward and planted a long, loving kiss on Hinata's lips. If her face could have gone a darker shade of red, it probably would have. Hinata was screaming in her mind even as it melted away from the bliss of finally kissing Naruto, oh Kami, he's kissing me. Naruto-kun is kissing me. Naruto shortly broke the kiss and smiled at her. He then laughed a bit at her expression before he actually started getting worried her face was frozen like that, Hinata-chan. Hello? Naruto snapped his fingers in front of her face a couple of times before she finally snapped out of her blank stare. It took a minute to process what had happened, but after she had fully processed it again she looked straight into Naruto's Rinnegan eyes, Naruto-kun. Naruto nodded with a genuine smile, and before he knew it, Hinata was latching onto him in a tight hug. Naruto was so surprised by the sudden movement that he fell backwards. By the time he had registered what had happened, Hinata was already hugging him tightly while laying on top of him. She buried her face into the crook of his neck and started to sob softly. Naruto was confused, Hinata-chan. Why are you crying? Did I do something wrong? Hinata managed to look up at him, tears streaming down her face. No, Naruto-kun. I am not crying because I'm sad. I'm crying because I am just so happy. She reburied her face into his neck and continued to sob softly. Naruto blinked not quite understanding, but in the end he just mentally shook it off and returned the embrace. She responded by burying her face deeper. Aosu was finally in the general area Naruto was jumping through the trees toward where he could feel his life force, which was an ability he had picked up from his own sensei before he took his place as the harbinger of Yami. When he finally reached the training ground, the first thing he noticed was that he was with someone, damn kid, I told him just to eavesdrop not to reveal himself. Doesn't this damn kid? His thought process instantly stopped when he saw that Naruto was with a girl who he was embracing and also took note that the girl was crying into the crook of the boy's neck. Kaosu paused and blinked a few times before smiling, I think I'll let this one slide. He then jumped off, making sure no one else approached the, dare he say it, adorable scene. It was a while later that Hinata finally managed to stop her sobbing. Naruto helped her sit up. They were silent for a bit before Naruto spoke, Hinata-chan. I have to leave now. Promise me you won't tell anyone you saw me. Hinata nodded, I promise, Naruto-kun. Hinata then topped her earlier bold action by leaning forward and giving Naruto a quick kiss on the cheek. And Naruto-kun. Please remember that I will always love you. Naruto smiled as he wiped a tear from his eye, thank you Hinata-chan. That means a lot to me. Naruto stood up and then he helped Hinata up. He then spoke to Hinata one last time, now don't stop training, you hear? I expect you to be the next time we meet. Hinata nodded determinedly, of course, Naruto-kun. Oh, and before I forget. Here's something I have been holding on to for a while, Naruto pulled out a scroll and handed it to Hinata. Since I can recreate it, it's no problem that you have it. I knew I had to give you this once I found out how dense I was not to notice your feelings for me. Hinata blinked, what is it, Naruto-kun? Naruto winked at her, you'll just have to read to find out. Oh, and don't let anyone know about it. Alright. Hinata nodded and smiled. Naruto winked again and bid farewell, vanishing in a shuncheon of swirling leaves. After Naruto had left, Hinata took the scroll and opened it. Her eyes widened in shock at what she saw. It wasn't long that Naruto was joined by his ex-sensei. Naruto grinned, there you are, Yukahan-sensei. Heard you got noticed in the wave during your last supply run. Kyosu deadpanned, shuddered, lover boy. I have no need for your complaints. Though I do say you picked a nice first girlfriend, kid. Naruto blushed red with embarrassment, you saw that. Kyosu snickered, oh yes, definitely. And let's not forget you share your eyesight with your paths as well. Just wait until we get home. Naruto's face paled and his eyes widened with horror, oh man, I should have blocked off my vision to them before all that. Crap. Now they're never going to stop teasing me. Did you forget about me, kid? A voice grumbled from inside Naruto's mindscape. Oh great, not you too, furball. Oh yes, me too, Rakuta-sama, the Kyuubi snickered. Naruto groaned. Sometimes he wished he hadn't opened up his connection to Kyuubi further, though he had to admit the fox's face during that meeting was priceless. Flashback about 2.5 months ago. Now, Naruto, we must deal with the fox in your gut, Kyosu told his temporary student. Naruto listened intently. The Rakuto Sennin was technically Kyuubi's and the other Biju's father. So this revelation shall be very interesting. Unfortunately, you must go in alone. Naruto nodded and with a quick good luck from his sensei Naruto found himself in the dank place that was his mindscape. He walked up to the cage that held the fearsome force of nature and spoke, hey Kurama. Wake up. Aki. You have some nerve trying to the menacing fox paused as he fully registered what his jailer had just said. What did you just call me? Kurama. It's the name I gave you isn't it? Naruto spoke in a matter-of-fact manner. His eyes were closed as he smirked. The name you gave me Kurama shouted. My name was given to me by Rakuto Sennin. The founder of ninjutsu. I know. I'm the Sennin's reincarnation. Of course he existed Kurama froze yet again and looked at the boy in disbelief as he processed what he just. What did you just say? You heard me, Kurama, Naruto said as he opened his eyes, revealing the Rinnegan. I am the reincarnation of your creator. Your father. The Rakuto Sennin. For the first time in his existence, Kurama, the Kyuubi no Kitsune, greatest of all the Biju, fainted in shock. The only sound heard after that was the young Sennin breaking down laughing. Kurama's groans echoed from inside Naruto's mindscape, you're never going to let me live that down are you? Never. Damn you. Now, lover boy, Kyosu said, turning to leave. Let's get home to begin your training. Naruto inwardly groaned. They were never going to leave him alone about his and Hinata's relationship ever again. I guess we both have something to tease the other about, Naruto thought before both he and Kyosu took off back to Uzashigakure. Jiraiya had returned the night before. It had been about a week since Kyosu's appearance in the Hokage office and Tsunade was anxious to talk to Jiraiya about recent events. Finally, the self-proclaimed super pervert enters the Hokage's office. Both Tsunade and Shizune were waiting for him. Hello, Tsunade-chan, Shizune-chan, Jiraiya said cheerfully. How are you two lovely ladies doing today? You seem awfully cheerful after you left Konoha 3 months ago, Jiraiya Tsunade pointed out. Jiraiya sighed, I'm trying to forget about the fact of how far I am from locating Naruto. It's probably already too late. It's not. Naruto is alive and well. Jiraiya's head shot up in surprise, wait, you mean you know where this is, where is he? Let me be that damn fool of a kidnapper. Jiraiya Tsunade said with the slightest bit of steel in her voice. Quiet and I will explain. Jiraiya shut his trap and nodded. Tsunade sighed, now I want to inform you that the supposed kidnapper visited me and a few last week, well in this very office. What? Jiraiya shouted only to be replied by a bash on the head from the female Hokage. Quiet, pervert. Jiraiya quickly managed to recover, but if that's true, why didn't you stop him? Interrogate him. Because 1, Naruto is unharmed and 2, the man revealed his name was Mahatsukai Kyosu, the harbinger of Yami himself. Jiraiya was quiet for a moment. Tsunade counted down in her mind, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. What? Jiraiya's shout echoed throughout Konoha. Naruto was busy training with his own father, Namikaze Minato, the Diva Path, when they heard a faint what? Off in the distance. They looked at each other. Sounds like Arasenin, Naruto shrugged. Must be the wind. Arasenin? Minato asked, raising an eyebrow. Oh, yeah. He's your sensei, Jiraiya no Gama-senin. There was a moment of stunned silence from Minato. Then Naruto noticed him struggling to hold in a laugh and it just got more and more obvious until. Ahahahaha. Minato broke down laughing. Oh, Kamisama. That's the perfect name for him. I wish I had come up with it. Naruto just gave his father a very strange look just as Kyosu and the other paths peeked around a nearby corner to see what the hell was going on. You mean that guy serves a god? Jiraiya shouted in a disbelieving tone. Are you kidding me? How is that possible? He visited us for the sole purpose of letting us know that Naruto is okay and is training to become stronger, Tsunade answered calmly. He says, however, we won't be able to see him for 2 years. 2 years, Jiraiya said, astonished. How did you let that slide? He presented many points that made sense and he held an air of honesty to him. To be completely honest with myself, the way he spoke and presented himself made me want to believe him. Not to mention that he did say that in 2 years we'd see him again, Shizune pointed out. And that'd be more powerful than ever before. Did he say where we were to see him? Jiraiya asked suspiciously. Tsunade nodded, he said that if we wanted to see him after 2 years to go to the ruins of Uzushiogakure. Jiraiya blinked in surprise, then his eyes narrowed, Uzushio? How did he manage that? The place is crawling with seals and traps everywhere. Seals that I would never be able to see all of before it was too late. Naruto isn't skilled at Fuinjutsu and I doubt that Kyosu could teach it to him, especially that fast. Only in Uzumaki would be able to remove those seals. Tsunade blinked, are you saying this man is in Uzumaki? Could be. Or, Shizune interrupted, earning the two old teammates' attention. He was telling the truth and he really does serve Yami. At the stare she got, Shizune decided to elaborate, twice he has appeared and once disappeared without leaving a trace is but a split second. Last time I checked, only the Yondaime could do that and he had the Hiraishin to boot. I noticed that he appeared from the shadows when he revealed himself last week. Obviously, this is a trait many could associate with Yami. Also, Shizune and the others could probably vouch for me on the fact that the aura he seemed to have around him was dark and powerful, yet he came off as a normal person, Tsunade continued. What does this tell you, Jiraiya? Jiraiya put his hand on his chin and thought, it does bring the situation to light a bit more if he was. How so? It means that it was most likely divine intervention that Kyosu went to Naruto. Tsunade and Shizune blinked. They hadn't even considered that. The harbinger of Yami, a god from the sacred realm, saving Naruto. Shizune tried to think of another scenario, maybe he did it out of the kindness of his heart. I mean Naruto was seriously injured. True, Jiraiya answered. But remember, so was Sasuke. And don't you think that was the case he would have brought both of them back to Konoha? They were both wearing Konoha Hideites. You'd think someone who served a god would know the Konoha leaf symbol in a heartbeat. Shizune put hand to chin. Jiraiya held a strong argument. Which begs the question. Why did Yami of all people want Naruto out of the village? Tsunade thought back to what Kyosu had said earlier. She remembered him saying something as to why he took Naruto, didn't he? I wouldn't exactly call it a kidnapping. I like to call it necessary intervention. Naruto is fine. In fact, the boy's better than fine. He's improving by leaps and bounds since I picked him up. Naruto is doing very well, however, due to recent events he can't reveal himself to you just yet. Believe me, he wants to, but he knows now is not the time. Tsunade. Jiraiya's voice came, snapping the Hokage out of her thought process. She looked up at him with an annoyed what is it look. Yes. You blanked out for a second. What is it? Tsunade sighed, I've been thinking back at what he said. And? There's a couple things he said that stuck out to me. One is that he called his taking Naruto as a necessary intervention. Jiraiya's eyes raised at that. So it was something that was planned by someone other than Kyosu if that was the case. Kyosu was probably just following orders, and if he was telling the truth and he was following Yami's orders, then they were in some serious trouble. Also, he mentioned that ever since he took Naruto that he's been improving by quote-unquote leaps and bounds, and that also Naruto does want to see us again, but he knows that now isn't the proper time. Jiraiya's eyes definitely widened further, so he's not only training Naruto in some way, but Tsunade nodded, yes, one of the gods, Yami or otherwise, has given Naruto some form of duty, and Kyosu, Yami's harbinger, is training him to be ready for it. There was a long pause in the room before Jiraiya spoke, you said they were in Uzushiogakure. Tsunade blinked, yes, that's what Kyosu mentioned. I was going to send a message to the daimyo telling him what's going on and asking if I can take the Konoha 11 and their senses to see him after 2 years. You do that? I, however, am going now. Jiraiya turned to leave, however, he was stopped. Jiraiya. Jiraiya turned back to his teammate Hokage and blinked once before asking, yes Tsunade. He said Naruto would be ready in 2 years and Naruto agreed as well. Honestly, I think if Naruto was in any danger the Kyuubified Naruto would have already gone on a rampage by now and we'd have been notified. We haven't, however, and I am willing to trust Kyosu with Naruto's training for now. We will get him back in 2 years. I am willing to wait. But I am not, Tsunade, Jiraiya said more aggressively. I failed Naruto as a godfather for his entire life. I am not going to let some man claiming to be the harbinger of a god train him without proving to me directly that he's trustworthy. Good day Hikage-sama. With that, Jiraiya's sunshine came out of the room. Tsunade sighed aggravated, Baka, I hope he knows what he's doing. I doubt it, Hikage-sama, Shizune sighed as well. Tsunade shook her head, I need some sake. Danzo sat in his office within his root compound when an Anbu appeared before him. The Anbu knelt and said, Danzo-sama, I bring news. Jiraiya of the Sennin has left again to confront the kidnapper of Uzumaki Naruto head-on. Danzo hummed to himself before dismissing the Anbu. That Anbu guard for the Hokage had been Danzo's spy and informant for 10 years now. He was the one who had overheard the Sandaime talk about how the poor Jinchuriki was in an orphanage and that was all he needed to gain more of the civilians to his side and increase his power. He used the boy as a scapegoat and every civilian and many shinobi respected him for revealing the demon incarnate to them after hiding in their village for so long. And under the guise of a young Yondaime wannabe no less. Still, karma seemed to have come back and kicked him in the ass due to their predicament. The daimyo was insanely furious at the kidnapping of the brat. He and his fellow elders and councilmen were now forced into heavy taxes due to this. Still Danzo had managed to get a foothold still in authority and amplified that. Despite their losses, the elders and the civilians held just as much power, if not more, than before. And even though Konoha lost its edge over the other villages in the Jinchuriki department, he was sure he could get Sasuke to the level of A. This would be especially so when he pulled all the strings to fulfill the requirements to unlock Sasuke's Mangekyo Sharingan. But Sasuke backing him up, it would be easy to convince the council, which the civilian side was bidding for more and more power over Konoha's daily rituals, to make him when he convinced Sanadahime to retire. Then, of course, there was the most recent issue that had appeared. The supposed kidnapper who went by the name of Mahatsukai Kyosu had appeared in the Hokage's office without either the Hokage, her assistant, the Anbu, or the 3 trained in tracking knowing he was there until he wanted them to. This posed a serious problem, which only grew more serious with the man's claim of being Yami's harbinger. The boy is being trained by someone so skilled, Danzo thought as he looked over the situation again. He will no doubt become much more powerful. And with him wanting to become Hokage and having the backing of the Shinobi Council, and the daimyo makes this very dangerous ground we are treading. Especially since that with this man training him claiming to be a servant of Yami, makes the situation worse if he were to go against us. He seems to be on the same side as that demon brat, and with him on the Hokage's side, we'd best not let ourselves get discovered. However, the recent news of Jiraiya ending off to where the two were seemed promising. Hopefully that bumbling fool Jiraiya will be able to convince the demon to either leave his sensei or convince them both to come to Konoha. The latter was better because Danzo could then use his Sharingan to attempt to control the demon. With the Kyuubi Jinchuriki under his control and with the harbinger of Yami likely to follow his lead no matter what he and Konoha would be unstoppable. And even if Jiraiya fails, Danzo thought evilly. I will worm my way into the group that heads out to meet them and then that brat will be easy pickings. Danzo chuckled darkly to himself before he walked out of the hidden compound to prepare for tomorrow's council meeting. Hinata was training by herself in one of the more isolated training grounds of Konoha. She had promised Naruto not to reveal the technique he had given her to practice and she was determined to not let anyone find out what she was practicing. She always had her Byakugan active to keep a lookout for those coming to the training grounds that was good training in itself. She could hardly believe the technique she had been given to her by Naruto. And he had trusted she could understand the instructions of the technique and could do it herself only made her feel happier that her new boyfriend believed in her so much. Boyfriend, she thought blushing. I feel a pleasant shiver going down my spine every time I say or think that about Naruto. Her friends had seen that she had been in an oddly good mood lately. She passed it off with a half-truth that she had gotten a new technique to practice and it was a very good one. She never told what it was and she had been training with a second new technique to show them if they asked so that she didn't have to reveal the technique Naruto had given her. Speaking of the technique Naruto had given to her, she had made very good progress on that technique. Nowhere near as fast as Naruto had done on the technique. Hell, he had gotten it down by this time. However, she reminded herself she wasn't practicing it as often as he did, nor was she the great achiever of all things impossible that he always seemed to be either. Despite it being slow, she was excited to learn this technique. Only a few people had learned it up to this point and she was going to be one of the maybe 6 people who had this technique in their inventory of techniques. And since Naruto loved using this technique she was excited to get to know it as well. She sighed as she kept trying to complete her task. It was proving more difficult than it seemed, how can something so simple on paper be so difficult in real life? Come on, pop. As if on cue, the object in her hand popped, spraying water all round. She gasped and then, after a pause, jumped for joy. She was now reassured that Naruto's belief in her was not in vain. In that one instant, whatever lack of confidence she had all but vanished all thanks to Naruto and the technique she'd been given, yes. That water balloon finally popped. Finally. Hinata took a deep breath of relief before she commented to herself, I think that's enough for today. Tomorrow I'll get the rubber ball. Hinata calmed down slowly and thought, Naruto, I'm getting ever closer to mastering the technique you entrusted to me. I swear on my clan's honor that I will not let that trust be for nothing. Bakashi-san. Bakashi had been walking down the streets of Konoha with his normal orange book in his hands when he heard his name being called. When he had turned to whomever had called his name he saw Kurenai walking up to him. Oh, hello, Kurenai-san, he greeted casually. What do you need? Kurenai looked at him for a moment before saying, mind walking with me? I need to ask you something. Kakashi raised his eyebrow before nodding his head, putting his book away. As they began walking Kakashi asked, so, what is it you need? It's about Hinata. Kakashi raised an eyebrow again. He knew Hinata had begun to train the hardest of the Konoha 10 or 11 as it would be in a couple months due to her crush on his old student. He had grown to respect the Nalinjursashi Kunoichi for her ignoring the demon inside of him and just seeing the boy who kept her at bay. Curious, he asked, what about Hinata? You know she has been practicing a lot, mainly by herself, after team practice is over, right? Kakashi nodded. Well, ever since last week, she's been a little. She's been very happy for someone so determined to get Naruto back after his kidnapping. Kakashi almost flinched at the word kidnapping, since he was now convinced by the man that this wasn't true. He had come to realize that during their first encounter, the reason the man, now named as Kyosu, gave him that no-contact blow was because he had no time to sit and try to reason with him, since the other members of the retrieval team would have arrived by that time. And that was something Kyosu probably didn't want to deal with. Still, he knew Kurenai was right. Hinata hadn't been happy, nor did he think she would be happy until she was sure Naruto was safe. What's her excuse? Kakashi asked. She says she's got a very good new technique she's been practicing, but the fact is she's as happy as Naruto is after learning a technique. I don't think she'd be that happy until after Naruto was safe. Something is going on and she won't tell us. Kakashi hemmed before asking, and what do you want me to do? In your years as a shinobi you've been on many missions I'd imagine with Hyuga clan members, Kurenai began. Much more experience than I was hoping you could try to see what technique she's practicing. Kakashi thought about it for a moment, I don't know. If she's that intent on making sure the technique stays a secret I don't think there's much I can do. Besides, who's to say she won't tell us eventually? Maybe this technique she got from someone could really help us and she wants it to be a surprise. Trying to worry less about Kurenai. If she starts to get really strange, let me know. Kurenai seemed dissatisfied but knew that was probably the best she was going to get for now and nodded. As she walked off, however, Kakashi began to think. Last week. That was when Kyosu appeared to us in the Hokage's office. Is it possible that he visited her as well? Or is someone else involved? Kakashi paused a moment before a thought struck him. Someone like Naruto. The more Kakashi thought about it, the more it made sense. Obviously Naruto had trained under Kyosu for 3 months and his new sensei's skills at hiding in the shadows were just incredible. Added to the mix Naruto's unimaginable ability to make the impossible possible and there's a good chance he mastered some of Kyosu's stealth abilities. While Kyosu was here Naruto could have very well come with him. He remembered Kyosu's words about Naruto wanting to come back but knowing now wasn't the time. It's quite possible he eavesdropped on them to see how they were doing. And it also probably means, Kakashi thought, that if he overheard them talk about her he'd have learned of Hinata's feelings for him. It was true, with Hinata's newfound resolve due to her feelings for the blonde the Konoha 10 had begun to talk about her a lot. Mainly in an respecting and dare he say admiring way. If Naruto heard that he had been oblivious to such things for so long it was obvious, despite knowing he probably shouldn't, would have gone to see her. If that were the case, they probably would have become good friends very fast with that. It would easily explain Hinata's sudden change in character. But that still leaves the issue of the technique she was given, Kakashi thought. If my theory is correct, it probably means the technique was given to her by Naruto. But what technique could it be? Kakashi, still in deep thought, decided, I need to discuss this with the Hokage. She'll want to know about this. With that, the copy nin sunshine away. Tsunade sat in her office dealing with what she called the Hokage Infinity paperwork curse. It never seemed to end. She took another swig of her sake before she heard a knock at the door. Eager for a break from her paperwork, she called out, enter. With that, the door opened as Shizune let Kakashi into the office. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, what do you need, Haddock? Earlier, Kurenai came up to me and asked me to watch one of her teammates due to a major change of character. I told her if it worsened I'd investigate, but it was something she mentioned during the conversation that brought my attention. I thought it necessary to come talk to you. Oh? Tsunade asked curiously. And who is this student of hers? One Hyuga Hinata, Hikage-sama. Tsunade's eyes widened in surprise. She knew Hinata had been in love with Naruto and had been the most determined out of all the Konoha 10 to train to fight Naruto's kidnapper, and what is wrong with her? Kurenai-san mentioned that she had been unusually happy. As happy as Naruto would have been after mastering a new technique or getting a free stash of ramen. A happiness she thought she'd never see from Hinata unless Naruto had been brought back safely. And what did Hinata tell her? That she had a new technique that she was excited to learn. Tsunade cocked an eyebrow. Hinata isn't a person I'd consider getting that excited over a technique. Me neither. So what got your interest in this whole thing? The fact that apparently this all started last week. At first it didn't register in the Hokage's mind. Then she thought about it. Last week they had received a visit from the man who was Yomi's harbinger. The same man who took Naruto. Are you suggesting Kyosu visited her as well? Tsunade asked curiously. I thought that at first. Until I thought this up. Naruto has obviously been training for the past 3 months with Kyosu, right? The man is an espionage genius in his own league. He snuck in and out of a shinobi village and snuck into and stayed hidden in the Hokage's office for our entire meeting while 3 tracking experts were present in there. Naruto is amazing for being able to pull off the seemingly impossible. We considered Kyosu's ability to stealth impossible. Do you not think Naruto would learn some of this stealth as well? Tsunade stared at Kakashi in disbelief. Are you trying to say that Naruto was here? Kyosu said that Naruto wanted to visit but knew now was not the time. However, that does not mean he didn't drop by to hear how we were doing. With how much the Konoha 10 has been talking about Hinata's feelings for him, I have no doubt he would have heard about this and sought to fix the mistakes he had made. Tsunade leaned back, he's making some very good arguments here. Naruto was in the village when Kyosu was present. I do recall Konohamaru and his team mentioning that the gate guards had seen a suspicious young man with long black hair and a younger boy with a bandana and shades. Could that have been them? There's more, Kakashi continued, getting Tsunade's attention. I believe the technique she is learning might have been from Naruto if my theory is correct. It's probably why she hasn't revealed what it is yet. Tsunade nodded understandingly because Naruto asked her not to. There was a silence before Tsunade spoke. Well, whatever it is, we won't need to worry about it. Kakashi's eyes widened and Tsunade laughed. What? Did you expect me to order you to spy on her to figure out what the technique was or if it really was Naruto who visited her? If it is true and it was Naruto, I see no reason having to worry about it. She'll reveal when she's able to. 2 years from now all will be revealed, added Kakashi. I trust you can wait if I can. Kakashi hesitated for a brief moment before nodding. Hi, Hokage-sama. Tsunade returned the nod. If that is all, you may leave. Hey, Atasan. Yes, Naruto? Minato asked, looking at his son. How did you and Akasan meet? Minato and Kushina looked at each other. The recently reunited family were sitting in a small living room in the recently rebuilt Yuzukage Tower with Kyosu and the other paths. The group had decided to bring Izushi Agakure back to its former glory, and though they were prepared to start building the old-fashioned way, Hashirama provided the solution with his wood release and, with his wife's and Kushina's guidance, were able to resurrect Izushi Agakure back to the way it was before it was attacked. It was truly a stunning sight to behold. The city was very beautiful now that it had been raised from its ruined ashes like a phoenix. Well, Minato said, thinking back to old memories. We met at the Konoha Shinobi Academy. She disliked me at first, but after I saved her after she was kidnapped by Kumo Shinobi she fell for me. I eventually returned her feelings and we were married. It was mainly due to him proving to me he wasn't a wimp and him liking the one thing I hated about myself, Kushina said, adding her own 2 cents. And what was that, Akasan? My red hair. Why did you hate your hair? I think it looks pretty cool. Thank you, you're the second person to compliment it. The first was your father. Everyone else made fun of me for it. Isn't love grand? Mito commented as she lovingly held onto her husband. Then she got a mischievous smirk that made Naruto sweat a bit. Isn't that right, Naruto? Oh man, not this again. Naruto yelled, his face turning red with embarrassment. It's not fair. It's 7 against 1 here. Don't you mean 8 against 1, kid? Came Kurama's snickering voice from Naruto's mindscape. Shut it, furball. Naruto screamed mentally. Naruto then heard snickering and turned to see Kyosu holding back his laughing. What's so funny, Yukahan-sensei? Nothing, lover boy, Kyosu grinned. It's just that I think 7. No, 8 on 1 is completely fair. So you think you can stand against myself, Kurama, and my paths, Naruto grinned. Kyosu shrugged, maybe. Maybe not. All I know is that all is fair in love and war. Ain't it the truth? Kushina giggled and passed a mischievous glance at Minato, who sweated a bit. Why are you all teasing me about this? Naruto asked frantically, waving his arms. Because you make it so easy, lover boy, Kyosu smirked. Yeah, I don't know how easy it is for you, Yukahan-sensei. You've obviously never loved someone. Silence flooded the room as Kyosu's smirk almost instantly vanished to a frown. He tilted his head down so that strands of his hair covered his eyes. What did you just say? Kyosu asked in a forced whisper. The paths instantly saw the area around him slowly grow darker, but Naruto took no heed of these warning signs. I said you obviously have never loved someone, crunch. Naruto flew back into a wall at lightning speed after a massive blow practically shattered his skull. Naruto held his face in pain. He looked up enraged, what the hell was that for you boss? Naruto stopped dead. In front of him was Kyosu, however, the background behind him was obviously much darker than before. A black fiendish aura danced around his body and his midnight blue eyes were slowly turning crimson with rage. Even the 6 paths in the room couldn't help but be a little afraid of the aura coming off of him. He certainly lives up to his title. The sheer power and intimidation radiating off of him is insane, Hiruzen thought. He, along with the other paths, were worried about Naruto. While they knew Naruto had gone too far, they weren't expecting this reaction from the usually calm, happy-go-lucky guy he usually was. They prepared themselves to step in if necessary. He bent down to Naruto's level and used his hand to force Naruto against a dent in the wall. "Listen here, kid, and listen well," Kyosu said in a dark voice that threatened Naruto with extreme pain if he dared to speak. "Don't you ever say that to me again. Do I make myself clear?" Naruto, shaken by his old sensei's sudden actions, could only nod, "Hi, Mahatsuke-sensei." With that, he let Naruto go and left the building, leaving his comrades wondering why that one phrase pissed him off so badly. Naruto got up. He looked sad. He had upset one of his friends, and now he was going to fix it. Naruto began to walk towards the exit. "Naruto-san, where are you going?" Tobirama asked though he already knew the answer. "To find him. I need to apologize." With that, Naruto left the room. His paths followed. Naruto and his paths found Kyosu on the roof of one of the westernmost buildings in the village. He was holding a picture in his hand. Upon closer inspection Naruto noticed that there were 2 people in it. One was Kyosu himself though not dressed in his normal black garbs, but in a more regal black and gold Haorian armor. The woman seemed a little younger than he was. She had bright blue eyes which also seemed to have a touch of gray in them. Her hair was also an odd color. It was snow white. Her hair was shorter, only about shoulder length, and she wore a nice gray and blue kimono. They were both smiling in this picture. Naruto also noticed that Kyosu's hand was on her far shoulder and they were very close together. Naruto sadly looked at his sensei's state. It was easy to tell the young man was trying to hold back his tears but was only moments away from breaking. Naruto paused a moment before speaking. "Who was she?" There was a very long pause before Kyosu sighed. "Her name was Mahatsukai Shinko-yasana. She was my wife." Naruto and his paths tensed. Naruto felt really bad now for what he said. But he also heard him say it was as well. Naruto swallowed. "What happened to her?" There was another long pause before Kyosu answered through sniffs. The phrase he spoke hit a chord in all of them. "I failed." With that, Kyosu broke into sobs. Naruto had never seen him like this. Minato and Kushina looked at each other. Having lost the other before because of the Kyuubi attack, they knew what it was like to lose their spouse, as did Mito when Hashirama died. They knew that experience was outright spirit-breaking and filled with sorrow. They wouldn't wish such sorrow upon even their worst enemy. Slowly, Naruto walked over to him and put a hand on his ex-sensei's shoulder in a comforting manner. The path soon joined in. "Finally, I made it," Jiraiya said as he approached Uzashigakure. It was still hidden through some fog that covered the area and he was still on alert for any of the seals and traps in the area. "Don't worry, Naruto. When I get there, this so-called harbinger of Yami is going to get straight through the skull." I don't believe this man's words. Not even for a second. Finally, Uzashigakure came into view and Jiraiya stifled a gasp. Before him were the ruins of Uzashigakure. Minus the ruins part, however. It was fully restored. It was as if the city had never fallen in the first place. Jiraiya couldn't help but stare wittied. "This is impossible." "Not at all, Sennin." Jiraiya spun around to see a man cloaked and standing there behind him. Jiraiya's eyes narrowed. "So you're the one who kidnapped Naruto?" The man shook his head and groaned. "Really? Didn't I just call it necessary intervention?" If Jiraiya could have sworn he saw the man blink under his hood. "Wait, aren't you I don't know 2 years early?" Jiraiya growled. "You'd think I'd take your word for it? That I'd just go along with your schemes because you made yourself seem honest? No, I don't think so." Jiraiya ready to kunai that caused Kyosu to smirk under his cloak. "You want to fight me, Arisenin?" Jiraiya's eyes widened at that. "How do you know that name?" "I trained Mr. Loverboy," Kyosu said matter-of-factly. "He told me his little nickname for you. I work very well." "Loverboy?" Jiraiya thought, but it was broken when the man continued. "Well, if you want to fight I won't stop you." Just then, Kyosu held out his hand and a trail of shadowy air slowly formed on his hand. It streamed out to form a side-like shape. Kyosu clenched down and the shadows immediately vanished and a large black-handled scythe was left in its place. Add to the cloak and hood, Jiraiya could have sworn he was fighting a reaper from the western myths that he had heard in his travels. "Just know, Jiraiya no Gama Sennin, what you are getting into." The self-proclaimed hermit could feel the devilish gleam coming from under the man's hood and he mentally prepared himself for the fight of his life. Naruto was taking a break from his training with his paths. He had finished SEAL training with his mother not too long ago and was getting ready for chakra control training with Tobirama. This training session was always the toughest for Naruto due to the ungodly massive chakra capacity due to his lineage, the Kyuubi, and now the fact that the Rakudo spirit within him is now awakened. But, if anyone could teach him it'd be Tobirama. The man's chakra control was perfect after all. Currently, Naruto was sitting inside the Uzukage's tower relaxing. Tobirama, Hashirama and Hiruzen were there with him. Mito and Kushina were in the Uzukage's office rewriting documents which were destroyed in the genocide of the Uzumaki years before. Minato himself was heading to the wave to gather more supplies for his wife and her relative, who needed more ink and paper. That still left one person unaccounted for, however. "Where's Yuka-Han-sensei?" Naruto asked his paths. They looked at each other and shrugged. "I don't know, Naruto-san," Hashirama confessed. "I remember hearing him say something about watching the gate and then he left," Hiruzen pointed out. There was a pause before Hashirama spoke. "You don't think?" Boom. The sound of an explosion filled the air, causing the new Sennin and his paths to jump up in surprise. Within an instant, Mito and Kushina charged downstairs and Minato appeared thanks to a Hiraishin he had placed in the room. "What the hell just happened?" Minato shouted an alert along with Kushina and Mito. "We don't know but we have a feeling it has to do with Kyosu being at the front gate," Tobirama explained. "Wait, you mean someone is here?" Kushina asked. "Didn't say not for 2 years." Apparently, it was ignored, Naruto huffed. He then walked to the door. "Come on, let's go." Jiraiya was panting. This guy was definitely no slouch. The guy was matching up against him easily. The worst part was that his opponent didn't really seem all that winded. If he was hiding it very well. "I must admit, you're putting up a good fight, old man." Jiraiya scoffed. "I'm not that old. I must admit your skill with that scythe of yours is incredible." It was no joke either. Moments ago, Jiraiya had tried to use the Rasengan against him, but Kyosu had spun his scythe blade straight into the spiraling ball. This caused it to detonate before Jiraiya was ready and caused him to fly back. Kyosu, who was at a good distance due to the reach of the scythe, managed to brace himself for the explosion and managed to keep himself firmly in place. Despite Jiraiya thinking this man was lying about being Yami's harbinger, there was no doubt this man was very good. He had effectively used the Gamma Sennin's own attack against him and the Rasengan of all attacks. That was impressive. Jiraiya smirked, but it means nothing. "I am one of the 3 Sennin and I haven't even entered Sage mode yet. You are just somebody who claims to be Yami's harbinger." It was then that Naruto and his 6 paths arrived on top of the village gate. They had just managed to hear Jiraiya's claim. Naruto clenched his fist. "Hiro Sennin. What's he doing here?" "Obviously, he didn't want to wait," Hashirama answered. "Them calling out Chaos-san like that," Mito began to point out. "He's going to get himself seriously injured." "Yeah, poor Hiro-sensei," Minato sighed. "Claims?" Kyosu asked to release some killer intent upon the poor pervert. "I don't claim anything." Jiraiya then became painfully aware of the surrounding area. It was as if something large moved in front of the sun over the village. The entire area was growing ever darker and a fiendish black aura began to swarm around Kyosu himself. "But if you're so intent on finding out what I say is true," Kyosu continued with a devilish smirk painted on his face. "Then get ready to experience it firsthand." Jiraiya suddenly felt a wave of pressure hit him. He felt like he was wearing a very heavy set of training weights, but Jiraiya knew he couldn't falter. Not now. He made his decision on what to do. "Fuchius no Jutsu." Jiraiya called out as he slammed his palm into the ground, summoning the 2 elderly toads Shima and Fukasaku beside him. "Jiraiya?" Fukasaku cried. "What's going on here? Why were we summoned?" "Sorry, Pa," Jiraiya replied. "I need both of you right now. As much as it's a lady repellent, I need Sage mode against this guy." The 2 toads looked at the dark and powerful man across from Jiraiya. Both their eyes narrowed. "Jiraiya? Who is that?" "That man is named Mahatsukai Kyosu. He claims to be the harbinger of Yami." The toads blinked and scanned the man again. They swallowed. "Jiraiya?" Shima began. "He isn't claiming it. He's telling the truth." "What?" "She's right," the male great sage toad replied. "I can sense his energy. Not quite chakra but very similar, not to mention a divine attribute. A dark divine attribute, but divine no less." Jiraiya swallowed hard before he and the 2 toads stared down the dark man before them. Fukasaku let out a breath. "We'll help you go into Sage mode, but don't expect this to end well, Jiraiya." Jiraiya nodded and did a couple of hand signs. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." 3 shadow clones appeared and Jiraiya ordered, "Keep him at bay." The 3 shadow clones charged at the harbinger who merely evaded them. Kyosu didn't try to stop Jiraiya. He really wanted to fight him in his Sage mode. As the shadow clones distracted Yami's harbinger, the 2 toads hopped onto the man's shoulders and shouted, "Sen. Ryusei no Jutsu." But that they fused to Jiraiya's shoulders and Jiraiya entered Sage mode. His nose got bigger, warts covered his body, and his white hair grew longer. Toad eyes also replaced his own as well. Alright, Jiraiya shouted. Let's go. Naruto raised his eyebrow, at Tausen. What just happened to Hirosenin? He just entered Sage Mode, Minato answered. Sage Mode? Yes. Gathering natural energy from the surrounding area allows him to transform into Sage Mode. However, he was never able to do it completely. So, he has to summon those two elderly Sage Toads to fuse with him and stabilize his natural chakra. So, in other words, his Sage Mode is imperfect. Right. Naruto hemmed and then went back to watching the fight. Yeah. Jiraiya shouted as he charged at Kyosu, attempting to give him a mighty display of his taijutsu abilities. Kyosu dodged 2 punches before swinging his side. Jiraiya managed to move, but the swing did cut open a gash in his shirt. Crap. That was close. Jiraiya thought. Okay, close-range fighting is not a good idea with a guy skillfully wielding his scythe. Kyosu smirked. What's wrong, Senin? Too close for comfort. Jiraiya glared back, just making a plan of attack. Of course you are. Oh yeah? Jiraiya taunted, preparing an attack. Take this. Senin. Gomen. The Senin and 2 toads all opened their mouths. Jiraiya fired a stream of oil out of his mouth, Fukasaku fired out a stream of wind, and Shima fired out a stream of fire. The huge inferno flooded towards Kyosu. The Harbinger seemed unimpressed. Naruto and his paths grew wittied as the blazing inferno washed toward him like a tsunami. Kyosu sighed and held out his hand. Kage Mijutsu? Yami no Bakura. The blast of darkness shot from Kyosu's hand in a straight line towards the Senin. Waves of shadowy air rippled off the blast of darkness as it traveled. These waves dispersed the flames of the inferno and caused it to fade away. The blast itself struck the Senin, knocking him far back before the attack vanished as it ended. The Senin was flying through the air before catching himself quite a ways back. The attack didn't leave any mark or anything, but the Senin could have sworn it was almost like getting hit with one of Tsunade's light punches, except with a fist about 3 times bigger. That was no drank just to either, Jiraiya thought. I've never even heard of Mijutsu before, but it looks like it doesn't need hand signs. This could be a problem. Jiraiya growled, it doesn't matter, short-ranged or long-ranged. He again went through the hand signs, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 2 shadow clones of Jiraiya formed next to him in a puff of smoke, and the 2 charged at him. Kyosu shook head. He quickly sidestepped one clone and expelled him with a swing of his scythe. He quickly turned around and gathered energy into his free hand. Kage Mijutsu? Kakuso. Kyosu swung his energy-filled hand in an upwards arc, causing a spike made of black energy to shoot up from the ground and impale the other clone, causing him to dispel as well. Kyosu grinned and turned to face his opponent, smirking with a face that screamed, "Is that all you've got?" His reward for the smug act was for it to be delivered right into his skull, forcing him into the ground. It detonated. Boom. Boom. Now Naruto began to shout but was stopped by his father. His father gave him this look. Wait. Let's watch and see if he can pull through. Naruto hesitated for a moment before nodding to his diva path. Jiraiya had jumped up and was catching his breath. He finally had a break and he, at the very least, had done some serious damage to his opponent. He was about to straighten his back to observe the damage when he heard a voice. Nice shot. Jiraiya's as well as the toad's eyes widened as he looked up. Kyosu was slowly getting out of the crater he had created with his. The man's cloak had been heavily damaged and he could now see the man's face, it liquid eyes and all. Kyosu was smirking. I have to admit that one hurt a lot. Kyosu stood up and tossed away his damaged cloak. He revealed his long black hair and a torn sleeveless and black guy. A dark gray sash was tied around his waist. The man slammed his scythe into the ground before cracking his knuckles. I think now I should get a bit more serious and show you some more advanced Kage Mijutsu. Don't you agree, Gama Senin? Kyosu's taunt caused Jiraiya to tense, especially when Kyosu picked up his scythe and started spinning it. Kage Mijutsu? Yami no Shio. Kyosu stopped spinning his scythe and slammed the top of it into the ground. A wave of a black smoke-like substance washed out and coated the surrounding area, much like a water falling into a basin. Kyosu leaned back up and smirked. And then fell straight into the blackness like if he was on top of a lake and just stopped his chakra from allowing him to waterwalk. Jiraiya stifled another gasp and began to look around, wondering where he was. Just then, Jiraiya felt his subconscious screaming at him to move. Jiraiya jumped away just as Kyosu erupted from the black smoke beneath him, swinging his scythe in the process. Kyosu landed from his jump and started to swing continuously at the Senin before the hermit sidestepped around and readied a. When he was about to use the attack, Kyosu vanished into the blackened air at their ankles yet again. Jiraiya could only dispel them and wait. Hiruzen couldn't help but grin. That is certainly a very useful technique. Minato chuckled. Yeah, it's like having thousands of Horatian seals on the floor of a battlefield, only they can't be erased, and you can hide as well. Good analogy, dear, Kushina grinned as she continued to watch her husband Sensei struggle against the harbinger of Yami. Why thank you. Jiraiya instinctively moved again as Kyosu shot from the ground beside him. This time, however, Kyosu didn't follow him. He just smirked, maybe I should make this a bit more interesting. What do you think, Gama-senin? What are you going to do? Jiraiya taunted. Fart out smoke. Kyosu chuckled a bit at Jiraiya's taunt before snapping his fingers. Instantly, 4 man-sized cyclones of shadowy air erupted in from a seemingly random place in the black-covered battleground and began to slowly move around the area. Kyosu smugly grinned at Jiraiya one last time before stepping into one of them and vanishing. Jiraiya immediately went on alert. Great. It isn't bad enough that he could vanish into the floor, but now I have to pay attention to these moving pillars now. This is getting better by the minute. Jiraiya quickly dodged another swing as Kyosu appeared and disappeared. Damn it, this is getting old. Jiraiya then challenged, alright, Mr. Harbinger. Come out here and we'll finish this right now. The cyclones instantly vanished, causing Jiraiya to blink in surprise. Unbeknownst to him, so did his godson and the paths observing from nearby. So be it. Jiraiya spun around. Kyosu was standing a ways away from him. His side was planted firmly on the ground. Jiraiya got into a fighting stance, and Kyosu grinned. He raised up his free arm so it pointed straight into the air. Kage Majustu. Kage no Hizo. Kyosu said as he pointed his arm at the Sennin. As he did so, dozens of black, spearheaded chains erupted from behind him and arced towards the poor hermit. Jiraiya, Naruto, and the path's eyes widened in horror and a number of them pierced through the Sennin's body. To their surprise, however, the chains didn't leave a wound or draw blood or anything. However, Jiraiya suddenly felt the chains retract towards their sender, and the spearheads caused the unwilling hermit to fly right towards Kyosu. Jiraiya's face made contact with Kyosu's open palm with such force that the shadowy air around Kyosu's feet dispersed. Kyosu grinned evilly. Good night. Kyosu shouted as he slammed the poor man's head into the ground with such force that even Naruto and his paths could feel the shock wave caused by the impact. The Rakuto Sennin reborn and his paths all winced. Ouch, Naruto said in sympathy of his own-sensei. That has got to hurt, Minato agreed. When the dust settled and the shadowy air finally vanished, they all saw an unconscious Jiraiya. The toads were gone and his sage mode was deactivated. Kyosu let out a sigh, it was fun, old man, but sadly it's over now. With that, Naruto and his paths appeared besides him. Naruto raised an eyebrow, I trust you didn't do anything too damaging. Kyosu grinned, might have killed a few brain cells with that last one, but other than that I think he's fine. His companion sweat dropped and looked at him. Kyosu looked at Naruto, so, should I send him back to the Hokage? Naruto shook his head, no, I think he does deserve to know what's going on. Kyosu blinked, and why is that exactly? Naruto grinned, Jiraiya is in charge of a massive spy network, Yukahan-sensei. I recall you know that never well, right? Kyosu's response was a stifled groan and him rolling his eyes in annoyance. If he knows and trusts us we can get some information from him just as Konoha does. Those present widened their eyes. That was a very good point. He could provide them all with valuable information to help them over the next couple of years. Kyosu nodded, I'll take him inside. Jiraiya groaned as he got up. He had a massive headache. What the hell happened? Oh, yeah, Jiraiya thought solemnly. I got my ass handed to me by that guy who took Naruto. Jiraiya clenched his fists in rage, damn it. He slammed his fist beside him, but was surprised to find he hit something soft. Jiraiya looked down at what he hit, it was a blanket. He quickly realized he was in bed. He looked around to find himself in a room he didn't recognize. Jiraiya groaned, well, isn't this lovely? Well, sensei, came a voice from in front of him. Jiraiya looked up and gaped at what he saw. There was Minato, standing there, alive, right before his eyes. But he noticed something strikingly different about him. One was that he had metal piercings on his face. The other was that he had purple eyes with 6 circles rippling out of a dot in the center. The Rinnegan, Jiraiya realized with a gasp. Minato smirked, glad to see you awake. With that, Jiraiya fainted. Minato blinked then shook his head, or glad to see you were awake. A few moments later. Jiraiya groaned and sat up again, what kind of fucked up dream was that? I thought I saw my student alive and with the Rinnegan. You did. Jiraiya's eyes widened and he looked up in shock, Minato. But how? Relax and I'll explain. Jiraiya nodded and took a deep breath. Minato returned the nod, to answer your question I am alive because I have been brought back to be one of the 6 paths of a bearer of the Rinnegan. Jiraiya blinked, care to elaborate? Minato nodded, a bearer of the Rinnegan has 6 paths that can be utilized by him or her, in addition to having control over the basic 5 elements. These paths are the Deva path, the Asura path, the animal path, the human path, the Preta path, and the Naraka path. Each has their own special ability. With me so far? Jiraiya nodded and Minato continued. A Rinnegan user can use metal piercings like the ones that I have in me right now to control 6 bodies of his or her choosing, and each body can control one of these paths. By channeling chakra into these piercings and into these bodies, he or she can control them. So if they are controlled bodies, how are you? Well, you? My guess is Kyosu had something to do with it. He's the harbinger of Yami. I assume he did something. What he did I'm not sure. Jiraiya nodded, so, which path are you? Minato smiled, I am the Diva path. I have the ability to manipulate gravity. And this is in addition to my old abilities. Jiraiya's eyes widened in surprise. Minato chuckled at his sensei's face. Oh, you haven't heard anything. Just wait until you hear who the other paths are and their own abilities are. Jiraiya looked at his student, who are they? Minato's mischievous smirk caused Jiraiya to sweat a bit. First, the animal path is my wife, Uzumaki Kushina. She has the ability to summon an animal at will without needing a contract. Jiraiya's eyes widened, but he knew Minato was just getting started. Next is the Asura path, who is Uzumaki Mido, wife of the Shaddai. She has the ability to summon and utilize any weapon of her choosing. After that we have Senju Hashirama, the Shaddai himself, as the pre-top path. He had the ability to absorb any and all chakra-based attacks. The Nidaime, Senju Tabarama is the human path. He has the ability to read minds and rip people's souls from their bodies. Jiraiya was looking at Minato's face in pure and utter shock. 5 shinobi, each easily ranked to ranked, were now paths for a Rinnegan user, the only one of which he had ever seen was Nagato. But Jiraiya couldn't see how Nagato would have gotten these bodies for his paths. Then again it could have been Kyosu. Jiraiya then realized Minato had missed something, what about the Naraka path? Minato smiled, the Naraka path is very interesting. That path has the ability to summon the King of Hell. The King of Hell. Yes, and it by far has one of the most useful abilities out of all of us. The King of Hell gives the user the abilities of restoration and interrogation. It has the ability to interrogate people, and if they lie they get their souls devoured by the king, and the ability to raise any of the paths back up should they fall. Jiraiya gaped. Minato was indeed right. Such abilities did make this path incredibly important to them. Who is the Naraka path? Minato smirked yet again, your sensei, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage. Jiraiya leaned back in shock. His sensei was back and was one of the paths of this Rinnegan user, one who he thought was Nagato, so where's Nagato? Minato blinked, who? Wait, Nagato isn't a Rinnegan user. Who's Nagato, sensei? He was a Rinnegan user I found and trained during the Second Shinobi War. He was an orphan in a Megakure. Minato looked at his sensei in surprise, and he could feel Naruto and the other path's surprise as well. But if Nagato isn't the Rinnegan user who summoned you, then who is? Minato laughed, he's my son, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Jiraiya was instantly on his feet, Naruto how? Minato bopped his sensei on the head, calm down, sensei. Screaming won't get your question answered. Jiraiya settled down and Minato continued, but seriously, how did Naruto get the Rinnegan? Simple, Minato answered as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. He is the reincarnation of the Rakuto Sennin. He and the founder of ninjutsu are one and the same person. Jiraiya was gaping. He could have sworn Nagato was the sage's reincarnation. But now in truth it was Naruto. But, what did that make Nagato? I think I need to sit down. Minato nodded as Jiraiya took a seat on the bed. Sensei, Minato began, getting Gamma Sennin's attention. I cannot let you see Naruto and the other paths just yet. And before you argue, let me explain. It was obvious that you weren't going to listen to Kyosu, so one of the paths or Naruto had to talk to you. Naruto isn't supposed to reveal himself as the Rakuto Sennin's reincarnation just yet, so we paths talked about it and decided I'd be the one to talk with you. I see, Jiraiya said sadly but with understanding. Don't worry, sensei, you'll see us all again in 2 years' time. But before then, we need to ask you a favor. Jiraiya blinked and looked at his student, what is it, Minato? We need you to inform us of the outside world with your spy network. We'd like to know what's going on to make sure we're up to date when 2 years pass. We are going to be very isolated here so information won't really get to us. You think you can do that? Yes, Minato, I understand, Jiraiya nodded. He got up and gathered his gear, but before he left he turned to Minato, goodbye Minato. Could you please tell Naruto that I'm sorry for not being there for him? Minato nodded, of course, sensei. And, could you tell Kyosu I'm sorry for doubting him? No need, Jiraiya turned to see Kyosu, recloaked and all, leaning against a wall nearby. I'm used to people not believing me at first. I can't exactly blame them though. You did good out there though. Best fight I've had in a while. Jiraiya chuckled, anytime I guess. See ya. With that, the Gamma Sennin jumped out of the village hidden of the whirlpool. He wouldn't return again for 2 years. Flashback 2 years ago. Tsunade was taking a break from paperwork and was stealing a sip of some sake she had hidden from Shizune. That was when she heard a voice calling from behind her. Tsunade Tsunade turned around in surprise to see Jiraiya crouching on the windowsill. She was starting to see why her sensei hated it. Jiraiya, what are you doing here? Jiraiya jumped into the office and around to the other side of the desk, I need to speak with you in private. Tsunade saw the seriousness in the Sennin's face and ordered the Anbu out of the room. When they were gone she gave him a look asking him what had happened, I just returned from Yuzushiogakure. Tsunade's eyes widened and then nodded, so what happened? Izushio has been fully rebuilt. It was as if the village was never attacked in the first place. What? Apparently, Naruto and Kyosu had been busy. Tsunade blinked, so you believe him now? Yes, and you'll understand why in a second. Tsunade nodded and motioned him to continue. I had gotten to the main gate of the village and I was greeted by Kyosu. We got into a fight that forced me into sage mode. And he still beat my skull into the ground. Literally. Tsunade was practically gaping. This man had beaten Jiraiya at his most powerful. How strong was he? Jiraiya continued, he was very fast and strong. He combined those two flawlessly. It felt like you had hit me once or twice. He is very skilled with a scythe and even managed to cut a Rasengan in half, causing it to detonate before I was ready. He also used techniques he referred to as Kage Majutsu. It was very powerful and didn't require hand signs. Tsunade leaned back in her chair as she let it soak all in. After a few moments she gazed at Jiraiya, what types of techniques did he use? This was this powerful blasting technique that stopped my senpo. Gomen. He had another technique that caused a black spike to quickly shoot from the ground. He had yet another that covered the area in shadowy mist that he could disappear and reappear into. He could even control that technique to the point of snapping his fingers to summon 4 cyclones of the shadowy mist to hide himself for ambush tactics further. The only reasons I wasn't butchered during that point of the fight was due to my quick reflexes and my instincts screaming at me to move. Tsunade tensed as her eyes went wide. The fact that Jiraiya said the only time he was close to death was when he peeped on her, and now he was stating that his guy had almost butchered him on more than one occasion in the span of a single fight. It really gave new light as to just how powerful he was, but she supposed it made sense. The man was the harbinger of a god, it would make sense he was very powerful. He needed it to fulfill God's wishes. Tsunade looked at her comrade, what about the last technique? Jiraiya half smiled as he put hand to chin and thought, that last technique was actually the one that brought an end to the fight. Now that I think about it, it reminds me a lot of Kushina's chakra chains. Tsunade raised an eyebrow, really? How so? He shot dozens of shadow chains with spearheads at the ends. They flew at me and it ended with a number of the chains piercing my body. Tsunade gasped and looked at Jiraiya, as if she were searching for open wounds. Jiraiya laughed, don't worry, they surprisingly didn't even leave a wound or anything. But they did retract, taking me straight into Kyosu's hand, which then smashed me into the floor, knocking me out. Sounds like a very tough fight, Tsunade stated matter-of-factually. Jiraiya lost his smile and suddenly turned very serious. Tsunade. I now know why Kyosu called it necessary intervention. Tsunade's face became serious as well, how so? Well, him being the harbinger of Yami meant that was ordered by the gods, but I now know the reason. I trust you know the story of the Rakuto Sennin. Who doesn't? It's a very popular myth. Tsunade. It's no myth. Tsunade's eyes widened, what? The Rakuto Sennin is no myth. Neither are the Jubi or the Rinnegan. How do I know this? Because the Sennin's reincarnation walks this earth right now. Tsunade stared in disbelief, what does this have to do with Naruto? Everything, Tsunade. The sage's reincarnation is Naruto, and the boy now bears the Rinnegan itself. Tsunade's mouth dropped. If the situation was not so serious, and if Jiraiya had been thinking, the Gama Sennin could have photographed that face and used it as blackmail. Instantly she was on her feet, he's what? You heard me, Tsunade. That boy passed off as dead last is the reincarnation of the very founder of the art we practice. But how? I wasn't given the details, but this is the least of the shock value. You'll never believe who told me all this. Tsunade looked at her teammate a bit unsure, who was it? Jiraiya took a deep breath, it was my student, Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage. Tsunade stared at her fellow Sennin like he had grown a second head, how is that possible? He's dead, isn't he? Yes, and technically he still is dead. Tsunade stopped and blinked, technically. Jiraiya nodded, yes, allow me to explain as best I can. From what Minato told me, a Rinnegan user has the ability to use a special metal implanted in 6 bodies and can then control them. These bodies each control one of the 6 paths the Rinnegan bearer is capable of using, in addition to using the 5 elements. These paths each have their own abilities, but again the bodies being used are just technically puppets. Minato mentioned something about the possibility of Kyosu being involved with the return of their memories and just their being in general, but how he did it is still hidden. Tsunade nodded, settling down a bit, so, who are the other paths? Jiraiya paused a bit. This was going to be interesting. The other paths are Minato's wife, Uzumaki Kushina, your grandmother, Uzumaki Mito, your grandfather, Senju Hashirama, your great-uncle, Senju Tabarama, and our sensei, Sarutobi Hiruzen. Tsunade blinked twice before she fainted back into her chair. Jiraiya smiled, and I haven't even told her about the path's abilities yet. Tsunade shook her head, those paths of his sure do have some powerful abilities. Gravity manipulation, mind reading, chakra absorption. It's no wonder Naruto's past life was just so powerful. She looked down at her paperwork and sighed, hopefully with the return of the past Hokages, we can fix the displacement of power that Konoha has suffered. A knock came from the door. Enter, Tsunade ordered, and with that, the elder Danzo entered. The old warhawk stared down Tsunade before saying, I trust we are soon going to be leaving to fight this kidnapper of our young Jinchuriki. You're not going, Danzo, Tsunade frowned. The daimyo gave permission only to the Konoha 12 and their senseis as well as myself and Jiraiya to go. You are not going. You have no right to deny me this chance to see battle again. I didn't deny you anything, Danzo. The daimyo said no. That is finally. Danzo looked at her and shook his head, very well. As Danzo left he smirked. It didn't matter. He still had Sai on the team going and that was good enough. After he was gone Tsunade's sighed. Despite acting oblivious for the sake of face with the civilian populace and the shinobi forces, she knew very well that the civilian council and the elders were grabbing more and more power as the months went by. She was slowly becoming a figurehead and she knew it. This has to stop, she thought to herself. But I can't do anything without solid proof or I'll turn the populace and the shinobi against me. Hopefully their return, especially the return of my grandfather and of Minato, will help solve that. With that, she returned to her paperwork, determined to finish quickly so she and the 4 teams could get going. Minato had just finished gathering supplies for the trip. She was finally going to see Naruto again. She had kept her promise and had trained very hard to the point of reaching the rank of Jonin. 2 others in the Konoha 11 had made it to Takubetsu Jonin. Her cousin Niji was one of them though that was no real surprise. The other was, surprisingly, Shikamaru. Sometime after Naruto's visit, the Wave, Spring, Suna and T had reopened trade with Konoha. It wasn't anywhere near as good of a trade as it had been, but they were more willing to comply. She had always suspected Naruto had something to do with it as she knew that while the Konoha populace would probably always be ungrateful to Naruto, he still considered the place his home. But back to her original point. With the restart of trade, the Kazuki Gaara's elder sister, Temari, had become the Suna ambassador to Konoha. She had formed a close relationship with Shikamaru and eventually the two started dating after Shikamaru had an apparently tense conversation with her brothers. She had gotten his rear in gear and had forced him to take the Jonin exams, which he passed, and ended up a Takubetsu Jonin as did Temari around the same time. She had also pushed Niji to get into a relationship with Tenten and they were slowly hanging out more. She was sure they'd be dating soon. The rest of the Konoha 12 had all made Chunin. Her own teammates, Shino and Kiba, were training for the next exams that would come the following year, as were rest of the teams. Her being a mean she was much more free of her standard team, as unfortunately didn't see them as much to go on straight Jonin missions, and because 3 teams were now missing one member every now and then many of the teams mixed to go on missions. The one team no one ever wanted to pair up with was the remade Team 7. No one wanted to call it that, but Sasuke and Sakura insisted and finally they just gave up. Their team was now led by a player with a less than spectacular record named Shinrai Nai, who now taught Sasuke, Sakura, and some shinobi trained by one of the village elders named Sai. The boy was pale. A Makinga's slip black pale, too. Apparently, he had some ability with ink or some such. Hinata shrugged. She didn't care. She was now and didn't have to worry about such things. But, Hinata thought. I do feel sorry for Kiba, Shino, and Akamaru as well as Kurane-sensei. They still have to put up with their egos and that one boy's lack of one. She herself had improved a lot in the past 2 years. She had fulfilled her vow and mastered the Rasengan and, though she never did show anyone that technique save for one person, she mastered many other techniques of the Hyuga clan. She had even managed to impress her father. She did, however, owe her great improvement to the one person who knew she had the Rasengan technique. Flashback 2 years ago. Hinata was in her secluded training area again. She had finished the first stage and had almost completed the second stage of the Rasengan. She was concentrating very hard to get it right. Come on, you stupid ball. Hinata screamed in her head. I've trained in this for over a week and a half. Pop. And right on cue, the rubber ball burst. Hinata blinked and thought, wow, I should have screamed at it to pop a week ago. She suddenly froze when she heard clapping right behind her. Right in my blind spot, Hinata thought. She turned around quickly to see Jiraiya of the Sennin leaning up against a tree. I must say, Jiraiya spoke as he stopped clapping. That was very good I must admit. To get this far in the Rasengan training this fast and by yourself is quite a feat. Jiraiya-sama. Hinata said, surprised. Two can explain. Jiraiya held out his hand, there's no need to explain. Kurenai and Kakashi started noticing your surprisingly happy and strange behavior recently and informed the Hokage who informed me after I took a trip to Uzushiogakure, where Naruto is. You saw Naruto? Hinata asked, stunned. No, I did meet Kyosu though. He beat the crap out of me, but he did mention Naruto. I was told who he is and everything. Though he did call Naruto lover boy, he playfully put his hand on his chin and smirked. Now I wonder why he'd call Naruto that. Hinata blushed and poked her two index fingers against each other. Jiraiya laughed a bit, thought so. Jiraiya then quit his teasing and simply smiled at her, so he gave you something to learn the Rasengan I see. Hinata nodded and Jiraiya walked towards her, well, would you like any help? Hinata blinked, you want to help me master the Rasengan? Jiraiya's smile widened, of course. If he trusts you enough to learn the technique then I will help you become a master at it. Hinata gave the Sennin a wide smile, thank you Jiraiya-sama. That'd be Jiraiya-sensei now wouldn't it? Hi. Hinata looked at her sensei for a moment before asking. Do you think you could train me to use the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu? Jiraiya smirked, want to be able to use techniques Naruto can't see. Hinata blushed brighter and nodded, that and I promised Naruto I'd be by the time we meet again. The Kage Bunshin no Jutsu will help me with that. Jiraiya nodded, so you promised Naruto you'd be in 2 years. Hopefully up to Takubetsu Jonin. Jiraiya shook his head and surprised Hinata with his next statement, no, that won't cut it. For Naruto. I will train you so that you become a. I'm going to help you really impress my godson. You're going to make him proud. Mark my words. Hinata blinked in surprise then smiled, hi, Jiraiya-sensei. Hinata smiled. Jiraiya had helped teach her and get her strong enough to make Jonin, and she was grateful for that. While he couldn't train her all the time he did train her every once in a while. She did, however, adopt Naruto's nickname for the perv. Jiraiya didn't do anything like that around her though. He didn't want to deal with Hinata's or Niji Juiken, the wrath of the Hyuga clan, or, even worse, the wrath of Tsunade and Naruto. Especially Naruto. She was his girlfriend and he didn't want to get his ass beaten down by Naruto and his paths, whom Jiraiya had told Hinata about. Needless to say, she was shocked by that. The fact that Naruto, theoretically, had control of 4 of the past and the wives of 2 of them was staggering. It was even more so when she found out the 2 wives were from Naruto's clan and that one of them was Naruto's mother. The biggest shock, however, was finding out Naruto's father was Yondaime. That had surprised her incredibly. Right now, however, she couldn't wait to see Naruto and meet his parents. Though she did have this nagging feeling that they were going to tease the 2 of them half to death, she shook her head, it's all worth it. She got her bag for the trip ready and waited for the summons of the Hokage that it was time to go. Those of the Konoha 12 who still respected Naruto as a good friend, except Hinata, who was still preparing to leave, had gathered together at one of the training grounds. They were all ready to go, they were just waiting for their senseis, Hinata, and the 2 loyal Sennin. They didn't care if Team 7 showed up to go or not. Over the last 2 years Team 7 and the other teams had grown rather distant. They'd worked together for missions, albeit very reluctantly, but outside of that Team 7 was avoided for the most part. This made Sasuke and Sakura angry as they wondered why they would abandon them, the top shinobi and Kunoichi from their academies for the dead last. I hope Hikage-sama gets here soon. I'm ready to rumble. Kiba shouted. Troublesome, Shikamaru grunted. She is probably finishing up her paperwork, Ino commented. You know she's been working endlessly on that, you know. They all nodded. Just then they heard somebody land nearby and they turned to see Hinata standing there. She smiled, hey, guys. Hey, Hinata, the others greeted. Hinata looked around, Jiraiya-sama and Sanadaha aren't here yet. They shook their heads and Choji answered, not yet, but they should be here soon. Hinata nodded. Yeah. Kiba shouted. And then we can kick that damn kidnapper's ass. Kiba. Hinata began just as their senseis appeared as did Team 7. Hi, sensei, the team said in unison. They completely ignored Team 7. Team 7's new leader, Shinrai Nai, cleared his throat, aren't you going to greet us? The man was easily in his late 30s and was dressed in standard shinobi garb. He had slightly messy brown hair and brown eyes. There wasn't much else to him than that. From what they had heard, he was decent in ninjutsu, jinjutsu and taijutsu, but he didn't specialize in any field. The team's deadpanned. Not really, Kiba stated. Then he turned to Hinata. So, what were you saying? She was going to say that the reason we are going to Yuzashii Agakure is not to fight. They all blinked as Tsunade and Jiraiya walked up from behind them. The Konoha 12 blinked in confusion. What do you mean, Hikage-sama? Tenten asked, confused. What I mean is that we are going to Yuzashii Agakure to see Naruto, yes, but the supposed kidnapper isn't our enemy. The people present who didn't know all widened their eyes. What? What do you mean by that? Kiba shouted. We trained extra hard to be ready to fight this guy, and you're telling us now he's not the enemy, Ino shouted as well. You guys can fight him if you want, Jiraiya commented. But don't expect to win. I fought the guy 2 years ago when I heard he was in Yuzashio, but he utterly destroyed me, even when I was at full power. They just looked at him in surprise, even Kakashi, who hadn't learned of Jiraiya's misadventure at Yuzashio 2 years prior. Jiraiya looked at them, the man's identity is Mahosukai Kyosu, he is the harbinger of Yami, the god of darkness. My summons, the Toads, confirmed this fact. The Konoha 12 were practically reeling at the thought. The man they had trained themselves to fight against was a servant of a god and a dark god at that. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Why did this harbinger take Naruto then? They looked at him. They were surprised he even cared. Tsunade answered, to train him. What? They all shouted but were silenced by Tsunade's order. Quiet. Now listen up, Naruto has become something far more powerful than any of us here. What he has become shall be explained by Naruto and Kyosu themselves once we reach Uzashigakure. Now, don't ask any more questions on the subject. They will all be answered upon arrival. Are we clear? Hi, Hikage-sama, they answered reluctantly though Sasuke was inwardly seething. He was trained by the servant of a god, how could that do anything? He's dead last. I refuse to believe he could be more powerful than all of us. Are you ready? Goddamn Hokage asked. They all nodded. Right. Let's go. Tsunade took off, followed by Hinata and Jiraiya, and then by Konoha 12. Their next stop. Uzashigakure. Uzashigakure, the hidden village of the Whirlpool. Once one of the most powerful shinobi villages and had once been destroyed, had now been raised up again like a phoenix rising from its ashes. Who was the cause for this? It was the Rakuto Sennin reborn. The founder of ninjutsu's reincarnation was finally trained to the point where his skill, power, and the number and variety of techniques could do the title of the Rakuto Sennin justice. The paths themselves had trained themselves as well. They had sparred with each other when they weren't fulfilling their own tasks given by Kyosu or by themselves, and they each continuously pointed out specific flaws in both fighting and in their techniques, with their own special ones. One thing they specifically trained in was their own personal abilities that they received as a result of being one of the Rakuto Sennin's paths. Since Naruto had all the memories of the Sennin, he was the one training them in their abilities. Kyosu always teased them how a boy in his early teens was teaching 4 Hokages and 2 highest-ranked Kunoichi, and he was always rewarded with a glare or a punch to the arm. He flinched at neither one. At least while no one was looking anyway. All of the paths were easily up to rank while Naruto. Well, Naruto with the knowledge of his past life, the training of both his 6 paths and of Kyosu, his insanely high chakra reserves, along with the incredible amount of shadow clones he could produce, and the Kyuubi itself all made Naruto worthy of the title of his past self, the Shinobi no Kami. More so than Hiruzen himself deserved it. His paths had mainly each taught them their specialties. Minato taught him ninjutsu and taijutsu. Mito and Kushina both trained him in kinjutsu and Fuinjutsu. Tobirama aided Naruto in his chakra control and managed to get it to near perfect. Hashirama focuses more on elemental training for Naruto. Hiruzen taught Naruto more along the lines of Jinjutsu, since Minato covered ninjutsu and taijutsu, as well as leadership since, as the actual Sennin, Naruto would technically be in command of them. Kyosu, after his training 2 years ago, focused more on Naruto's sensory abilities, his stealth, and his battle tactics as well, much like he had done 2 years prior during their 3-month training session. The outcome was beyond comparison. Naruto was no longer the Sennin's reincarnation, he was the Rakuto Sennin. He was the original Shinobi no Kami. He was the founder of ninjutsu. He was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. And his paths and Kyosu could all see it. When Kyosu had proclaimed him as such at the end of 2 years, Minato and Kushina hugged their child just like they did the day they were brought back. They couldn't stop saying how proud they were of him. Everyone there shed at least one tear in happiness. The family of 3 practically sobbed their joy. It was quite touching. Currently, all 6 paths and Kyosu were waiting outside the Uzukage Tower. Naruto was inside changing into the garments of his past self given to him by Kyosu. They didn't ask how he knew what the Sennin had worn, they guessed it had something to do with his vocation. Connection to his eyes and ears was cut off from the other paths, though he could still see and hear what they did. They were all smiling. They knew by now the Konoha shinobi were on their way, and they couldn't wait to see their faces at the bombshells they were going to drop. I think half of them are going to faint, Minato commented. I think only a quarter of them would personally, Tobirama said. No, I think I'd be more than that, Mito stated. How about we just make a bet then? Kyosu suggested. They all looked at him strangely. There are going to be a total of about. Let's see. 12 plus 2 plus 5 equals 19. There will be 19 people coming to Uzushio. How about we all say the number of people who we think are going to faint and the person with the closest number when we get there wins. Sounds good, but what are the rules? Kushina asked, smirking. 1 no picking the same number. 2 the same person fainting twice doesn't count. 3 all the losers must. Sing an embarrassing song in front of the entire group once they get settled in. Sounds good. They all nodded. Kyosu cleared his throat. I say 10. 7, this was Hashirama. 12, Minato stated. 11, Kushina bid. 8, Mito called out. 5, Hiruzen spoke. 6, Tobirama said. They all shook hands in agreement. Done yet? Came a voice from the doorway. They all smirked when they saw him. Kyosu nodded. Yes. Are you ready? Rakuto Sennin-sama. Naruto stepped out of the doorway. His Rinnegan eyes gazed upon his company. He wore a black shirt under a black samurai chest piece, as well as black pants with an orange sash. He wore black sandals with orange socks and also wore a haori. The haori was unique. It was white and there were 3 magatomas on either side of the high collar. On the back was a Rinnegan eye and below it were 3 rows of 3 magatomas. Around Naruto's neck was a necklace of 6 red magatomas and in his hands was a golden monk's staff. By Naruto's side in its sheath was a sword that Kyosu said was one of the swords that the Sennin actually used and the very sword he used when he faced the Juubi. Naruto confirmed this himself. The sword's name was Ekisukureba. It was a simple sword but a brilliant one as well. It was with a handle wrapped in fine leather with a single gold and white gem on the blade collar. The blade itself was a metal that even Mito admitted to having never had seen before and that it was truly a one-of-a-kind blade. Naruto said he had no memories making the sword and said that it was given to his past self by an old man by the name of Genji, who vanished shortly afterward. They decided to leave it at that. Naruto smirked, ready as I'll ever be, Kyosu-san. It's time for the Rakuto Sennin to enter the world. They had arrived. They had finally arrived. Tsunade's group from Konoha had finally arrived at Yuzushiogakure, a mighty village that had once been destroyed but was now completely restored. This surprised those in the group who didn't know, which was almost all of them. How is it possible? Kurenai asked in shock and awe. I thought this village was destroyed. It was, Jiraiya said simply. Then how has it been restored? Asuma asked. Naruto and Kyosu have been busy, was the simple answer. Indeed we have been, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see a man cloaked in black behind them. The shinobi save for Kakashi, Tsunade, Hinata and Jiraiya instantly went on their guard. The man simply laughed. And removed his hood revealing to them his long black hair that was in a dragon tail and his midnight blue blackened eyes. He gave a chuckle at their faces before continuing, I am Mahatsukai Kyosu, harbinger of Yami, the god of darkness. The group tensed. This was the man who took Naruto. He was the servant of a god. He was Naruto's mentor. They lowered their guard. Kyosu smiled and then turned to the Godame Hokage, he should be ready shortly. Shall I lead you inside? Tsunade nodded, please. Kyosu walked past them and waved his hand. The massive gate to the Yuzushio opened wide for them as they passed through and shut tightly after they had entered. The village itself was very beautiful, though it was very eerie due to the lack of people in it. The city itself was clean and neat. The pathways were made from cobblestone and were very smooth. Much better for walking than dirt, especially rocky dirt. As Kyosu led them through the abandoned village, the members of the Hokage's team couldn't help but think. So this is the man Naruto talked about? Hinata asked herself. He seems very mysterious and dark, but if Naruto says he's okay, then I'll trust him. So this was the home of my grandmother? It sure is beautiful, Tsunade thought. I hope people start to inhabit this place again. I'm sure Bachan would love that. Well, I guess I could just ask her. I will be seeing her soon. A tear fell from Tsunade's eye and Jiraiya noticed, must be thinking about her grandparents and great-uncle. This is going to be both touching and awkward when we meet them. So that's the harbinger of Yami. He doesn't seem that tough, I bet Sasuke-kun could beat him, Sakura thought to herself while Sasuke was glaring at the man, he's Naruto's mentor. Well, if he trained that worthless dope then I'm sure I can get him to train me. Sai, as emotionless as ever, looked at their guide through the village, so he's Kyuubi Jinchuriki's mentor. I will have to keep an eye on him for my report to Danzasama. So this is the guy who took Naruto? Kiba thought with a frown. And he's not the enemy. Why do I have a hard time believing it? So this is the harbinger of Yami? Shikamaru thought suspiciously. I can start to believe why Tsunade says Naruto is on a whole new level from us. This guy's mere presence makes him seem very dark and powerful, and if he trained Naruto, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if he was that powerful. This is so troublesome. Kyosu does seem very nice, Tenten thought. Even if his presence does scream Yaoreging Toti. I wonder how strong Naruto is since he spent 2 years with this guy. I hope he didn't gain that aura that this guy gives off. I can certainly see why this guy is called the harbinger of Yami, Niji thought as he used his Byakugan to scan Kyosu's chakra. Whatever he has isn't chakra, but it is very similar and is very dark and powerful. Suddenly, I'm glad he's our ally. Kyosu certainly knows how to pull off the sudden appearance very well, Kakashi thought back to when he met them at the gate. He did it at the Hokage's office, too. I guess being Yami's harbinger has its advantages. Hinata seemed surprisingly relaxed, thought Kurenai as they glanced at the girl. Despite being told this guy wasn't a bad guy and that he trained Naruto, she expected Hinata to be very edgy and suspicious around him. She seemed very calm and, dare she say, trusting of him. Why is that? I'll have to keep an eye on her. Finally, they reached their destination. The Yuzukage Tower. It looked a lot like the Hokage Tower, though it was a bit bigger, was a bit more regal in design, and was colored a darker shade of red than the Hokage Tower. Not to mention it did look a bit more like a tower with a taller, narrower building in the center of it. Needless to say, it did impress Konohinen. Kyosu turned around to face them, now he should be here any crash. Naruto suddenly landed next to Kyosu in his Sennin gear. His head was down and his staff held out to the side. Many of the Konohinen gasped and others jumped in surprise. No one had sensed him and he was fast. Kyosu didn't even flinch. In fact, he smirked, dramatic entrance much. Naruto quickly got up and faced him smirking. He did a dramatic spinning of his staff while he did so, what's your point? Their reactions were priceless. The two chuckled to themselves before facing Konohinen. They all either tensed or gasped or both. Naruto's Rinnegan eyes looked at them and raised an eyebrow, what? I don't get a hello. Hinata was the first to recover, hello, Naruto-kun. Naruto looked at her and grinned widely, hi Hinata-chan. Wow. You're looking as beautiful as ever. Hinata blushed a bit while the others, who didn't know how Naruto's little misadventure in Konoha with Kyosu 2 years ago, blinked and then proceeded to gape, when on earth did Naruto and Hinata get this close? And did Naruto just call Hinata beautiful? Hiba, however, voiced this opinion, when did this happen? Naruto and Hinata both looked at him before Naruto laughed, to tell you the truth, I visited Konoha in disguise about 2 years ago. I eavesdropped on one of your conversations and I heard you talking about Hinata-chan's feelings for me. I revealed myself to her and we got into a relationship. Wait a minute, Kurenai pointed at her student and shouted. You knew all this time that Naruto was okay and never told us why. Naruto-kun asked me not to. Kurenai blinked and sighed. That did make sense. Naruto then asked Hinata, so, Hinata-chan, did you get to where I asked you to be? Hinata smiled at the boy she loved, yes Naruto-kun. I am the only full in the Konoha 12 and I have mastered that technique you gave me. Her teammates and comrades blinked, technique? What technique? Hinata smiled at them as she held out her hand. Slowly, a spiraling ball of chakra formed in her hand. Those who didn't know collectively stifled a gasp. Niji gaped, he taught you the Rasengan. Hinata nodded as she let the technique fade. Naruto smirked proudly and hugged her, congratulations, Hinata-chan. I knew you could do it. Hinata pushed herself deeper into the embrace wearing a smile filled with happiness and a joyful pride, thank you Naruto. I love you. Love you, too, Hinata-chan, Naruto kissed Hinata. Ino and Tenten awed while Sasuke and Sakura glared. Jiraiya was thinking that he was soon going to have the best material for his next book and Tsunade, seeing his perverted psyche kick in, silently promised to kick his ass if she ever saw him try anything with those two. Kyosu then began to clap, good job, lover boy. Such a touching moment. Congratulations for getting back together with your girlfriend. Naruto deadpanned at the man, thanks for killing the mood, Yukahan-sensei. I'm Yumi's harbinger, lover boy Kyosu smirked. I live to ruin happy moments. Naruto rolled his eyes when Shikamaru caught his attention by clearing his throat, now that you've re-established your little romance with Hinata. Would you mind telling us what happened to you? Yeah, what's with your eyes? Tenten asked curiously. My eyes? Naruto blinked, still holding on to Hinata. Slowly, Naruto smirked, they are then Rinnegan, greatest of the 3 great Taijutsu. Impossible. Sasuke snapped. The Sharingan is the greatest. Don't you dare take us for fools. He's right, Sasuke Jiraiya simply stated, gaining their attention. The Rinnegan, also known as the Eyes of God, is the most powerful in the world. It has many abilities that can make our A and S rank seem like academy techniques. The others gaped. How was that even possible? Seeing their faces, Jiraiya smirked and decided to elaborate, even if it was just to throw them through another loop. Its main abilities include being able to control all 5 basic elements, which means that by extension all the sub-elements, and being able to see what clones are summons with the same eyes as well as what they hear. Also, like the Byakugan, they can see chakra networks as well, just not as strongly. They all stared at Naruto like he grew another head. The boy shrugged, what? Jiraiya chuckled, that's not all, however, most of the group faulted. How could that not be it? Ino shouted at the Gamma Sennin after he recovered. Jiraiya smirked, he also has access to the 6 paths. Ino blinked, 6 paths. Why does that sound a lot like the old Rakuto Sennin myth? Kiba asked, mainly to himself though others agreed. Jiraiya inwardly laughed, time for another hilarious bombshell. Simple, Tsunade said, cutting off Jiraiya before he spoke, much to his annoyance. The Rakuto Sennin is no myth. The Rinnegan was his. The bombshell hit the group like an atom bomb. Kakashi was the one who managed to speak, wait. You mean Naruto is the founder of ninjutsu? Tsunade nodded and Naruto spoke up, it goes deeper than that, but yes. Deeper? How on earth could it go deeper than that? All the instructors thought at the same time. Anyway, back to the 6 paths, Naruto states, regaining their attention. The 6 paths I can utilize are the Diva path, the Animal path, the Asura path, the Human path, the Preta path, and the Naraka path. The Diva path gives me gravity manipulation techniques. The Animal path grants me the ability to summon any animal of my choosing, regardless of whether or not I have a contract with them or not. The Asura path gives me the ability to summon and utilize any weapon I choose. The human path allows me to read people's minds through touch and tear their souls from their bodies. Then there's the Pre-Top path, which allows me to absorb all chakra-based attacks, making ninjutsu effectively useless against me. Then finally we have the Naraka path, which has the ability to summon the King of Hell, who can devour captives if they tells lies or revive the 6 paths themselves. They were all, needless to say, dumbstruck by this. They couldn't wrap themselves around the fact that it, wielded by Naruto no less, had this much power. Naruto laughed a bit at this. Asuma then thought about something. What did you mean by reviving the 6 paths themselves, Naruto? The others blinked and noticed it as well. What did Naruto mean by that? Even Hinata looked a bit confused at what Naruto had said. Naruto smirked. I was wondering who would notice that. Good job, Suratabasan. Asuma blinked at the lack of a sensei to it but shrugged it off. Naruto then continued, one other ability the Rinnegan has is the ability to take 6 dead bodies and, after giving them numerous piercings with a special kind of metal, controls them. They then act like another person that I control. Much like Kankuro's puppets except, due to Kyosu's tweaking, have their old personalities and memories back. So what you're saying is, Ino began, not daring to believe it. You can control 6 bodies as if they were clones. Pretty much, Naruto shrugged. Then he smirked mischievously, and you all know who they are. They all blinked, we do? Naruto snapped his fingers, and instantly 6 people dropped down besides Naruto. When they stood up, there was a collective gasp from everyone. There stood the first 4 Hokages. There were also 2 red-haired women that many people remember seeing before. The moment they saw these people, whom she had recognized from a couple books they had read, Hinata and Tenten fainted into Naruto's and Niji's arms respectively. Kyosu broke down laughing, and both him and the paths thought simultaneously, well, that's 2. Kakashi was the first to speak after the 2 had woken up, Sensei. Minato laughed a bit and said, yes, it's me. You can't believe it. Minato shrugged, neither can I. Though I do believe it's rather funny. Kakashi blinked, what is? That I trained you and then you gotta train my son. Your son? But the only other boy I trained other than Sasuke was Kakashi's eyes, both hidden and not, widened in surprise and horror, as did the eyes of everyone else save Kyosu, the paths, Tsunade, and Jiraiya. Hinata looked at the blonde-haired shinobi she was still in the arms of, Naruto-kun, you're the son of Yondaime. And me. The other shinobi turned to see one of the red-haired women finally speak, I am Uzumaki Kushina, granddaughter of the last Uzukage, and I'm Naruto's mother. Databane. They blinked, Databane. Naruto scratched the back of his head, yeah, I really take after my mother. Databeo. Those who still weren't shell-shocked, or glaring pissed off as it were, laughed. Asuma walked up to his father and nodded at the younger version of his old man. Odasama, he said simply, but the unsealed man shook his head and smiled, a Tausen is just fine, Asuma. And remember, tears are a sign of humanity not weakness. Tears began to drip from Asuma's eyes as he embraced his father in a strong hug. Asuma's students couldn't help but smile as father and son were reunited. As this was going on, Hashirama, Tobirama and Mito walked up to Tsunade. They looked over at her once before Hashirama said, Tsunade-chan, you look young. Special transformation technique. I see, Mito smirked. So you don't want to age gracefully? Not a chance, Bachan. The 4 shared a laugh and everyone's attention was regained by Kyosu. Now I think we should get to probably the biggest bombshell we're going to drop today. The others blinked. There was more to all this. Now that you know the Rakuto Sennin exists, we will tell you now that the Rakuto Sennin himself has been reborn into this world. What? Is Rakuto Sennin alive? Kiba shouted. Impossible. Sakura agreed. I agree, Kurenai nodded. The Rakuto Sennin being reincarnated doesn't seem very possible. Really? Jiraiya asked rhetorically. So, the founder of our way of life, who sealed a massive demon which was original all of the Biju combined, created by splitting the beast's chakra, creating the moon as the beast's body, and who was the ancestor of the Uchiha, Senju, and Uzumaki clans couldn't find a way to return himself into the world. Kurenai, the Rakuto Sennin reborn is real. The proof is right here. What do you mean, Jiraiya? Kurenai's eyes widened. She already knew the answer as did everyone else, but they didn't dare believe it was true. I am the Rakuto Sennin, Naruto stated. I am the founder of ninjutsu reborn again. I am the original shinobi no kami. I am the one who shall establish peace and order in this world. They all just stared for what seemed like eternity until Tenten, Ino, Kiba, Lee, Guy, Lee, Kurenai and Kakashi promptly fainted. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 9 people, Kyosu sighed. No one's winning right now. Team 7 was seething. There was no way that the Dobe was the reincarnation of the most powerful shinobi in the world. And the first one to ever exist. Well, Team 7-I. Sai was observing the situation and knew Danzo would find this interesting, but also made things much more complicated for him en route. Though, Sasuke began, but Naruto interrupted him. Really, team? You're calling me a dope still? You're what? A chunin? And I'm at a level higher than my 6 paths, all of whom are rank shinobi. I don't think I'm a dope anymore, team. Then fight me. What? Why would I want to do that? I am going to prove that my Sharingan outclasses your Rinnegan. Fight me now. Naruto took a deep breath and sighed. Fine. Are you sure that's a good idea, Naruto? Jiraiya asked his godson. He won't say no, and he'll end up attacking me anyway. Might as well humble him now. Love to see you try, dope, Sasuke scowled. If you two are going to fight, Hashirama stated. Do it at the training grounds. It's a lot easier to repair that place than in the center of the village. On that I will concur, Kyosu agreed and turned around. Follow me. At the training grounds, Naruto's paths and the Konohinen stood to the side as Naruto and Sasuke faced off in the center. Kyosu was looking back and forth between the two. Okay, this is just a simple duel. This is not a death match. If you try to kill your opponent, I will step in and you will be in severe pain for the rest of the week. Am I clear? Kyosu said menacingly. Some of the bystanders even started to sweat at how dangerously cold his voice was. Naruto nodded. Hi, Kasu-sensei. HN, Sasuke grunted. Ready? Kyosu asked rhetorically as Sasuke drew a kunai and Naruto tossed aside his staff and drew a kusu-kureba. Begin. The instant that was said Naruto stuck his sword into the ground and pulled out several. These, however, were special and any of the older shinobi recognized these instantly. Are those Hiraishin kunai? Jiraiya practically shouted. Minato grinned, of course. Don't you think it makes sense that I teach the Rakuto Sennin, my own son, the Hiraishin? Jiraiya settled down and nodded. Naruto ignored the banter between his father and his godfather and threw the Hiraishin around the entire fighting area. As soon as they all hit, Naruto vanished and appeared at one just besides where Sasuke was. The Uchiha barely managed to avoid a swing from Naruto's. When he tried to land a blow, Naruto vanished back to one farther away to avoid the hit. Sasuke then summoned a Fuma Shuriken and threw it towards his former teammate. Much to Konohinen's surprise, Naruto caught the massive spinning shuriken and used its momentum to spin around and toss it right back to Sasuke. Sasuke jumped out of the way, preparing to go through some hand signs. I know some high-up people in Konoha, Sasuke began. They offered me this technique even though I'm not there yet. I learned it just to spite you. Naruto raised an eyebrow as Sasuke went through the hand signs, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Instantly, 5 shadow clones of Sasuke appeared. Naruto smirked, you think this is going to get me angry? Are you performing the Kage Bunshin? I could perform that when I was a genin Sasuke. You're a. Also I can create over 1,000 shadow clones. You really think this irks me? Think again. Naruto seethed his sword and went through his own hand signs, let me show you how it's done. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 2 dozen clones appeared behind Naruto. All were ready to fight. Suddenly, half of them vanished in a yellow flash and the next thing Sasuke knew all 5 of his clones were taken out. His clones had been summoned just a couple feet away from some of the Hiraishin kunai scattered throughout the battlefield. Sasuke seethed. Naruto smirked. He forgot those were there, Hashirama mused. Must have short-term memory loss, his brother agreed and the two shared a bit of a laugh. Sakura scowled, how dare they make fun of Sasuke-kun. I bet he's just warming up. Naruto smirked, now it's time to introduce one of the Rinnegan's abilities. All but 3 of Naruto's clones dispelled and recalled behind Naruto. When they did, Naruto called out his technique, Bansho Tenin. Sasuke suddenly felt himself pulled off the ground and instantly found himself flying toward Naruto. Wah. Smash. One of Naruto's clones came down from above and kicked him into the ground. Hard. The force of the kick dented the ground and Naruto's clone only used a single foot to crush Sasuke under the powerful force of the downward strike. Then, the clone kicked up and backflipped off of the Uchiha elite hard enough to make him bounce off the ground. He went high enough into the air for another clone to come and give him an axe kick straight to the ribs, sending him flying towards the last waiting clone. That clone grabbed Sasuke's hair as he flew by and spun him around, much like the original did to the shuriken that Sasuke had thrown at the beginning of the fight. Naruto threw the Uchiha by his hair with great force back at the first clone, who had recovered. The first grabbed the Uchiha's face as it went by and slammed his head with a ground-denting force into the floor. Jiraiya winced as a flashback of deja vu struck him much like Tsunade's fist did. The Uchiha was rendered unconscious by the skillfully done combo. The clones dispelled as Naruto walked up to Kyosu, I take it that's a KO. Kyosu glanced at Sasuke before shrugging and playfully saying, yeah, probably. Kyosu grabbed Naruto's arm and held it up, winner. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Wait, Sasuke groaned as he got up. His head was bleeding from where it came into contact with the ground and he was very sore, but he was determined not to lose to the dope. Not a second time. I'm still going to beat the dope. Naruto, Kyosu, the paths, and most of the Konohinen shook their heads. No, Uchiha, Tsunade authoritatively said. You obviously need healing. Haruno. Do your job as a Medicnan. No. I will beat Naruto. Sasuke shouted. I will beat this damn Sasuke. Naruto spoke strongly. Sasuke stopped and glared at him. Naruto remained calm. Why are you so determined to beat everyone? To become the best. To kill Itachi. To avenge the murderer of my clan. Sasuke shouted. That's why I need power. I'll prove I'm strong enough to beat Itachi and avenge my clan. Then why are you so determined to beat me? You've beaten me twice as much as I hate to admit it, Sasuke grunted. If I can't beat a dope like you, how can I beat someone like Itachi? Naruto shook his head. Sasuke. If you could beat me now, after I had trained for 2 straight years with 6 rank shinobi and 1 rank non-shinobi, and now have the knowledge and memories of my past life, the founder of ninjutsu, as well as the full support of Kyuubi no Kitsune, you would be able to rip Itachi to shreds. Naruto took a deep breath before answering. Think about this for a minute. When have any of us ever succeeded in something by ourselves? None of us have. I was trained by 7 powerful and wise people. The Sennin were trained by the Sandaime, the only other person other than the Rakuto Sennin to receive the title of Shinobi no Kami, and even he was trained by the Shodai and Nidaime. Naruto looked at his teammate and smiled. Even when we were teammates we did things just like that. A team. Stop trying to do this by yourself, Sasuke. There is never shame in asking for help. We all need it at some point. If you let us help you, we will help you reach the point you need. Don't focus on your pride and hatred, Sasuke. It will bring your downfall in the long run. With that, Naruto picked up his staff and went back towards the group. I think we all should relax a bit. It's been a tiring day. As Naruto walked back towards the Uzukage Tower, Kyosu looked at the other shinobi there. I will show you each of your rooms. Then we can all meet in the mess afterwards. Agreed. Seeing no complaints, they all followed Kyosu back to the Uzukage Tower. The path stayed a little behind chatting to themselves. So who won the bet? Kushina asked curiously. No one, Hiruzen stated. 9 people fainted and no one chose that number. There was a pause before Minato asked, so did we all lose or? He trailed off and Hiruzen shrugged, I have no idea. Minato blinked, huh. And that was the last thing said as they made their way to the Uzukage Tower. They had gotten settled with their rooms and had met in the mess hall of the Uzukage Tower. Sasuke had healed a bit and more bombshells were about to be dropped. Not that the Konohana knew about the last part. So, Rakuto Sennin reborn, huh? Kakashi's eyes smile. I imagine there are few, if any, people on the planet who could match against you. Yeah, you're technically the founder of the art we seem to have taken for granted, it's so common, Tenten commented. Well, Naruto laughed and scratched the back of his head. You'd be right about that. Though being the Rakuto Sennin reincarnated. It is a bit creepy when you think about it, you know. A few of them blinked and Tsunade asked, how so? Well. How should I put this? Naruto thought a minute before saying, screw it. My past life is the founder of the Uzumaki, Senju, and Uchiha clans. They gaped at him as they processed the information. Not even Jiraiya had picked up on this earlier. Naruto nodded, yeah. Kind of messed up isn't it? Wow, Jiraiya started, mouth would deepened. So that makes you the Shodai, Nidaimes, Mitos, Tsunades, Sasukes, and your own mother's ancestor. That's very disturbing. You're telling me. Aki, I don't know if I could ever look at you the same way again, Tsunade commented. The others previously mentioned by Jiraiya could only nod. They didn't have any words to the fact that Naruto was their ancestor reincarnated. Then Kyosu brought something else up, you know, you all are related anyway. Since the Senju, Uchiha, and Uzumaki clans all descend from Loverboy's past life. You all are distant relatives anyway, so it doesn't really matter if he's your ancestor or not. Great, that's all I needed to hear, Tsunade sarcastically commented, rolling her eyes. I'm related to the Uchiha brat. That is all I need to hear. Right back at you, hag, Sasuke commented just as sarcastically, and this earned him a hard whack by Tsunade, effectively leaving him embedded in the far wall. Everyone sweat dropped. Hikage-sama, Tenten began. You know he's still healing, right? Yeah, so? Just wondering. Damn right you were. The reactions to this little exchange ranged from deadpans to snickers to sweat drops. Tenten looked at Naruto, who was sitting with Hinata right next to him, with curiosity. So, Seninsen, what was your training with Kyosu like? Call me Naruto. Seninsen or anything like that is just something Kyosu and my paths call me to irritate me. Naruto glared slightly as said to a group of rank shinobi and Harbinger, who were all snickering at that. He returned his face to a smile before continuing, as for my training, I didn't actually spend the whole 2 years training with just Kyosu. I trained with him and all my paths in different areas which they specialized in. My Itausen for ninjutsu, chakra control with the Nidaime, and so on. You practice chakra control. Kakashi blinked in surprise. Naruto nodded. Yeah, it took a while to get used to due the sheer massive size of my chakra reserves, due to my naturally large chakra reserves from being an Uzumaki, the boost gained from being the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, and now the added bonus of the power and memories of my previous life. I did get the full hang of it after a number of months and have gotten my chakra control to almost the point of the Nidaime himself. Rakuto-sama, I don't think even you could get to my level of chakra control anytime soon, Nidaime commented snickering. Naruto deadpanned, you know, this is the reason they feel the need to be all formal and crap with me. We know and that's why we do it, Kyosu stated, causing the paths to snicker. Naruto simply rolled his eyes, whatever, I'm still technically your boss. Yeah, Minato said, grinning. Because as we all know we get paid so much. The group laughed at that. It was nice to see a good heir come back to the group. Tsunade and Jiraiya both looked at each other, he's certainly grown, yeah, Jiraiya chuckled. Both mentally and physically. Tsunade nodded. So, we all know about Naruto's story, Ino commented. What about you, Kyosu? What? Kyosu's eyes widened, a bit surprised by the sudden question. Naruto and the paths tensed a bit. They knew the subject of Kyosu's past was a touchy subject for him. What's your story? How'd you become a harbinger? The entire room was instantly silent as they waited for his answer. Kyosu bowed his head solemnly and the Konoha 12 looked on curiously. However, the instructors as well as Tsunade and Jiraiya could tell just how tense Naruto and his paths were and they began to get worried themselves. Kyosu took a deep breath, fine, I guess I'll give you all the short version. Naruto and his paths' mouths dropped. He had never agreed to tell them much about his past at all. Kyosu sat down and was silent for a moment. Naruto, his paths, and the Konoha 12 all listened intently. Finally, he began, I began my training for being Yami's harbinger around. I'd say, 6. Anyway, I was born and raised west of Tsuchi no Kuni, so don't expect to be able to just go and find where I used to live. Religion and worshipping Kami and Yami was a big part from where I was from, so naturally being selected to be one of Yami's harbingers was a very special honor and I was held in very high regard despite how dark the vocation is. If that's so, then why did you come to Elemental Nations? Kiba asked. Was it to train Naruto? Part of it was, Kyosu admitted. But I was already in the Elemental Nations about 9 years before I received the order. By that time I was near Kumo, and since Yami likes to make my job harder, he only told me the kid's location was in a country southwest of me. Naruto and his friends all sweat-dropped to Kyosu's rant. But then Asuma brought up a good point, why were you in the Elemental Nations earlier then? Was it some sort of order from Yami? Kyosu shook his head, no, it wasn't. Before then it was simply to leave my homeland. Something incredibly important was taken from me and the populace didn't even glance at it. I left soon after. Guru and I looked at him, what was taken from you? Kyosu was silent for a long while before he spoke, my wife. Their eyes widened, your wife? What happened to her? The long silence rose again before Kyosu could speak. They could tell he was holding back tears, she was butchered. By my old sensei. The one who trained me to be a harbinger. They collectively gasped. Kyosu nodded sorrowfully, yes, he used the Kage no Hizo on me. A technique that summons ethereal chains with blades at the end. They are used to pull a person closer to the user or to chain him down. I assume you remember them, right Jiraiya-san? The Sennin nodded as the memory of his defeat entered his mind. He saw my attachment to my family as a weakness and sought to remove that attachment. He almost completely succeeded until my rage overtook my body and beat him into the ground. I crippled him but didn't kill him. No person, civilian or military, stood by my decision. In fact, they backed my old sensei up. So I left with one harbinger who supported me. They all nodded, recognizing that he had a hard life like so many of them had had. Shikamaru frowned, almost completely succeeded, Kyosu? What do you mean? They blinked and thought about those words as well. Then they looked at him as if begging for an answer. Kyosu, seeing he wasn't going to leave without giving an answer, sighed, my daughter is still alive and I brought her to the Elemental Nations with me. What? They shouted at him in unison. You never told us you had a daughter. Naruto shouted at him. Where is she? Kyosu frowned, don't you have a girlfriend? Naruto grew red with embarrassment, that's not why I want to know. She's training with the previous harbinger whom I mentioned, Kyosu stated. Yami ordered me to leave her to my friend to train as he needed me to still act as his harbinger. Why didn't he let you train your daughter and your friend still work under him? Tenten asked. Because he likes to screw me over, Kyosu stated bluntly. I work for him, but it doesn't mean he likes to make my life easy. Also, I've been a harbinger longer and I'm more experienced. Anyway, can we please change the subject? They all nodded and stopped questioning him. It was a bit before they brought up another subject. So, Naruto, Kiba asked, gaining the reborn Sennin's attention. I trust you are coming back to Konoha with us? There was a pause before he answered, temporarily, but. Yes, I will come back. Wait, temporarily? Why? Kakashi asked, stunned. Others were wittied as well. Naruto sighed, as much as I want to return to Konoha I can't. At least not permanently. But why, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked desperately as a heavy sadness tore through her like a jagged knife. The mere thought of her boyfriend not being able to stay with her like she had hoped he would was almost too much to bear for her. It's because of who I am now, Naruto answered. I am Rakuto Senin. My past life proclaimed to his sons, and to that one would come who would bring peace to the world through love and kindness. That person is me, his reincarnation. I have a mission to complete as the Rakuto Senin, and as such being attached to a village would unfortunately make my job harder. How so? Tsunade asked, crossing her arms. Don't get me wrong, Tsunade-chan, Konoha is still my home. However, think about it. To bring peace I must be able to travel around trying to bring the nations closer together. Gaining allies throughout the elemental nations will also gain me a lot of enemies, and if they knew me to be an active Konohanan, what do you think their reaction would be? Jiraiya nodded in understanding, to attack us. Right. But they must know that you were a Konohanan to begin with. Hinata tried to point out. Naruto shook his head, yeah, but what are they more likely to respond to? Would it be an active nin they knew was loyal to Konoha or a shinobi supposedly kidnapped by some unknown entity who holds no direct affiliation with any village? Hinata deflated as her face fell. Naruto responded by hugging her, believe me, Hinata, I do want to return. Now is just not the time. Do understand, Naruto-kun, Hinata said as tears fell from her eyes. She looked up at him and gave him a quick kiss. That mushy stuff between you two is getting on my nerves, Sakura blanched mockingly. Everyone glared at her. Damn, and I thought being a mood killer was my job, Kyosu muttered to himself. Shut up, Sakura, Kiba spoke angrily. You shouldn't be talking considering how mushy you've been trying to get with Sasuke for years. That's different. Sakura retorted. He's a freaking demon. The sudden force of strong killer intent sent Sakura to her knees. She managed to look up to see an enraged six paths before her. Kushina snarled, don't you dare call my son a demon. That'd make myself and Kushina one as well, Mito pointed out just as angrily. We were both Jinchurikis of the Kyuubi before Naruto was. The others blinked in surprise. Kyuubi had been part of Konoha that long. Was the general thought. Naruto raised his hand, stop. She's had enough. The killer intent slowly eased, allowing Sakura to stand. However, now she was terrified of the paths and immediately moved a far distance from them. Anyway, you're coming back to Konoha, aren't you? Jiraiya hoped to regain a lost subject while diverting attention to the previous scene. Even though it's temporary, why would you do that? Isn't that sort of defeating the purpose you just said? Naruto shook my head, it's for 3 reasons. 1. It is to get my heritage that was kept from me. 2. It is to sign my resignation from service as a Konohanan. And 3. It is to clean out all the rats within Konoha itself and to reignite the will of fire within the village. He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. After that, myself and my paths will join me on a journey around the elemental nations, seeking to ally with anyone we can. Kyosu will act as a sort of scout, giving us intel on the areas we will come across. Also, we'll have Jiraiya's spy network keeping us up to date on any activities that happen under the radar or simply out of our range. Another pause. Please try to understand. I love Konoha. It is my home. But right now, I have to act as a peaceabringer for the elemental nations, and I simply can't do it while attached to any one village. I'm sorry. Don't be, we understand, Jiraiya said. You have big shoes to fill and high expectations to live up to. You've got to do what you've got to do. Naruto nodded, smiling. Tsunade then spoke up, you know, that's the thinking of a Kage right there. You put the mission of your position before yourself. If you didn't have this job as Rakuto Senin's peaceabringer, I might just have let you take over as Hokage sometime soon. Naruto laughed, anything to get out of the Great Kage paperwork curse, Bachan. They all laughed at Tsunade's expense. She frowned, you think it's funny, I'd rather have a challenge of sadism with a Biki than be stuck doing that damned paperwork. Relax, Tsunade-chan, her grandfather laughed. We've all had to do it and we've all survived. Yeah, Minato laughed as well. And it was a damn bitch to all of us, too. The 4 previous Hokages all shared a laugh. They failed to notice Naruto's smirk, however, have you ever considered using shadow clones? Immediately the 4 Hokages stopped laughing and all of the Kages looked at Naruto wittied, what? Shadow clones, Naruto repeated. It could make the paperwork so much easier, you know. The 5 Hokages gaped at him. Why the hell had none of them thought of that? Simultaneously, all 5 facepumped themselves. Why on earth didn't we think of that? Minato asked rhetorically. I'm beginning to doubt my own mind, Hiruzen, the professor, stated. The others present laughed at their expense. So, Jiraiya said, gaining their attention again. When are we leaving? Tomorrow, Naruto answered. You only came here to get me correct. Jiraiya nodded. That was when Kyosu spoke up, well, one last thing before we go off to do whatever. Myself and the paths all made a bet on how many of you would faint. Which was 9 or you. Since no one picked 9, we've all officially lost. So, because of this, we all have to sing you a song. The paths all sighed. Kyosu followed suit, ready? 1, 2, 3. The following morning the Konohana and those of Naruto's groups met at the front gate. They were all packed and ready to go. Kyosu had already bid his farewell at the Yuzukage Tower. He was staying behind to hold down the fort as he put it. Naruto nodded to his friends, I trust we're ready to go. Yes, we're ready, Rikuta-sama, Jiraiya answered with a mock salute. Naruto groaned and shook his head, how many times do I have to say don't be formal like that with me? Might as well get used to it, Tsunade grinned. It's never going to change due to who you are now. Naruto sighed as a few laughs escaped from his friends. So, Naruto, Kiba began to ask as Naruto looked at him. Ready to go home? Naruto smiled, let's go. Naruto took to the trees. His paths and his comrades were right behind him. Danzo waited on the outskirts of Konoha waiting for the other party in the meeting that was about to take place. On either side of him were 2 root ninja. He stood there under the cover of darkness away from Konoha sensors. It had been about 5 days since Tsunade and the Konoha 12 left Konoha to find the demon brat. The spy amongst the Konoha 12 had sent him a message that was vital to both him and his accomplice, and it wasn't long before his ally appeared. The snacky pale senin known as Orochimaru appeared in front of Danzo. Kabuto was by his side. I trust you have a good reason for calling me out here. Orochimaru grumbled. He and Danzo had conspired to take over Konoha and eventually Hai no Kuni since a year after the Kyuubi attack. Danzo had managed to convince Orochimaru through secret meetings not to destroy Konoha, but to eventually allow him to become Hokage. Once he held that position, he would work with the newly founded Sound to overthrow Orochimaru, who would then declare himself the Fire Daimyo. Danzo wanted Konoha to become the strongest and to be the Hokage he was declared unstoppable, no matter how he did it. Orochimaru wanted power and authority, as well as the destruction of the will of fire. This goal fulfilled both of their foul goals. However, the message sent by his root ninja within the Konoha 12 called for immediate planning. Danzo nodded, I have received a message from my spy within the Konoha 12 who went to recover the demon brat. Oh, Orochimaru looked at Danzo, gaining some interest. Yes, Danzo nodded. As you know the brat has been training with the Harbinger of Yami. The man claiming to be the Harbinger of Yami you mean, Kabuto pointed out. He's not claiming anything, Danzo said with a tone of seriousness. Part of the message said that Jiraiya encountered the man named Mahatsukai Kyosu, and apparently he defeated Jiraiya rather easily, even though the fool was in Sage mode. Orochimaru's eyes widened. He beat Jiraiya in Sage mode. Even he would have trouble accomplishing that, and it wasn't a guaranteed victory either. Is that so? Yes, but that is not the most derailing part of the message sent to me. Oh? Yes, I assume you know of the Rakuto Sennin myth. Orochimaru raised an eyebrow, yes I have. The myth involves the founder of ninjutsu and the man who originally held my former sensei's title. Yes, but recent events have proved it far from myth. What? Orochimaru's voice rose. What do you mean? The demon brat, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, is the Rakuto Sennin's reincarnation and has the Sennin's mighty Dojutsu. The Rinnegan. What? Orochimaru shouted. That's not all. How could that possibly not be all? Apparently, the Rinnegan gives the person the ability to control 6 bodies to control 6 different abilities of the Rinnegan through metal piercings in their bodies. Orochimaru's eyes widened. He had seen that before when he was part of the Akatsuki. When he had met Pain. So it was the Rinnegan he had. Orochimaru thought. What of these bodies? Due to something the Harbinger did, the paths have all the memories and personalities of their living life. And these paths are the previous 4 Hokages and the previous 2 Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Orochimaru was, for once, speechless. This was a huge monkey wrench thrown into the gears of war set by both him and Danzo. The Jinchuriki brat, the boy who was considered the dead last, was now, in essence, the strongest and most powerful shinobi in the elemental nations. Orochimaru finally managed to break out of his stunned state and frowned, so, what is the boy's plan? Do we know? He is currently returning to Konoha with his paths as he calls them to file resignation papers from the Konoha shinobi force and to receive his inheritance as the 4th Hokage's son and as the son of the Uzumaki matriarch. Resignation? Orochimaru's eyes widened in interest and surprise. He knew the boy's patriotism for Konoha was sky high and the fact that he had continuously shouted he was going to be Hokage was only to prove that point. The idea that he'd resign from the Konoha shinobi force and consequently ending his chances to be Hokage was very surprising indeed. I wonder why the boy would do that. Apparently, Danzo answered with some seriousness. He sees his position as the Rakuto Sennin reborn as him being the one who shall bring forth peace and order and, due to this, he can't be bound to solely one country because it would cause him to lose credibility. Orochimaru nodded in understanding, they would see him as trying to benefit Konoha instead of everyone. Precisely. So if the boy is leaving Konoha, then how is he a threat? 2 reasons, Danzo stated. One is that he still says he considers Konoha his home, so attacking Konoha will gain his attention. And 2 is that he's also coming to Konoha to weed the rats out of the council. Orochimaru frowned, he's going to take away the control the civilians have gained over Konoha. Yes, and with the first 4 Hokages behind him, I won't be able to stop them without bringing suspicion upon myself. Then don't, Danzo's eyes widened, but before he could argue Orochimaru continued. You can't possibly hope to stand a chance against the reincarnation of the founder of ninjutsu, especially when he has the first 4 Hokages and the first 2 Kyuubi Jinchuriki as his paths as you say. Numerous Sharingans or not, he has the Rinnegan, the eyes of God. Not to mention if they find out about the Shodai's DNA, the Shodai himself will likely rip you apart. And you are of no use to mine nor your own goals dead. We will figure out how to deal with the Rakuto Sennin at a later date. Once he liberates Konoha, he will leave, which will leave you open to re-establishing yourself. While it's no longer possible to regain major control over shinobi systems in Konoha due to the chance they might contact the brat, it still leaves other options open. And in other areas. You mean the rest of the country, Danzo said catching on. Turning the civilians across Hai no Kuni against the Godame and her loyal shinobi. Have them cause such an uproar to force Daimyo's hand. Exactly. This is a very dangerous game, Orochimaru. If the daimyo catches wind of any of this, myself and my root shinobi will be finished. Orochimaru turned to leave with Kabuto. He smirked, then I suggest you don't get caught. With that, he vanished into the trees. Danzo turned away and took off back towards Konoha. His Ritman followed him. He had work to do. Heyosu sat cross-legged in his room within Yuzushi Agakure. Naruto, his paths and Konohinen had left about a day ago, and now the sun was setting. He had stayed behind to watch Uzushio, but he had other reasons. Or spiritual reasons. Slowly, he took a deep breath as he faded into his mindscape. Heyosu's mindscape was filled with a shadowy, black air that was not too dissimilar from his Yami no Shio technique. He sat there seemingly floating in midair for about half a minute before he heard a dark whispering. Your task with the boy is over, my harbinger. A cold, steely voice rasped in a dark whisper in his ear. It's time to leave. I cannot, Yamado no Kyosu answered. He instantly could feel the pressure of the deity's anger attempting to crush him. He slowly took in a deep breath. My lord, I swore to Naruto I would help him in his journey too. That is not your place, mortal. The voice of the god rose in anger. You are my servant and you will obey me. It's a matter of honor, Kyosu began to say, but was interrupted by his lord's terrible fury. You are my harbinger. You have no honor. You have no mercy. You have no choice in the matter. You belong to me. Yamado no Kyosu said calmly. I cannot. I swore to him that I would. But Yami's rage still trying to pressure into the ground, Kyosu heard the dark god start to laugh. Fool, this is exactly what led your wife to her end. You forget your place and you gain emotions. It will lead to your downfall. Or the downfall of someone else. Now Kyosu's anger rose. Don't you even dare attempt harm my daughter. Don't dare. I dare. If you continue down this path your daughter will suffer. Kyosu glared into the darkness and then let out a breath. My lord, if any harm comes to my daughter, god or not, I will bring you pain. My master or not, I have lost too much in this world to care about that foolish belief anymore. Kyosu felt the pressure of rage intensify. Calmly, he looked forward. I will leave. But only after Naruto meets with the other Rinnegan user. Nagato. There was a moment of silence, and Kyosu could feel the god's rage subside slightly. Very well, boy. I will let you play as Rakuto Sennin's pet. However, once he has met this. Nagato. I expect you to leave so that I can make you receive the mentality a harbinger is supposed to have. If you do not leave, I will repeat what you master did to your wife with your daughter. And I will make you watch. Kyosu clenched his fists in anger but nodded nonetheless. Very well, Yamadono. Kyosu left his mindscape and sighed. Sorry, kid. I guess I won't be enjoying the coming of peace with you and yours after all. We are approaching Konoha, Jiraiya stated, smirking. We'll be there in about 10 minutes. And it's almost midnight, Naruto pointed out. The fewer people who know about me before the announcement the better. You just want to see those people's reactions, don't you, Naruto-kun? Hinata giggled as her boyfriend smirked. That's part of it. Troublesome, Shikamaru grunted but smirked. Naruto may have matured quite a bit, but he was still the mischievous knucklehead they all knew. The daimyo's going to be arriving in Konoha in about 2 days' time, right? Ino asked. Yes, that is correct, Niji answered and then smirked as he thought back. His reaction at the revelations, however, were very funny, I must admit. No different from our own reactions though, Tsunade stated, embarrassing the Hyuga prodigy. Still, the reaction of the daimyo to the Rakuto Sennin's return was most entertaining as well as other more interesting parts of the discussion. Flashback 2 days ago. Naruto-kun, Hinata asked. Why are we stopping? We're making a bit of a detour, Asuma answered. From the states of confusion he was getting, he decided to elaborate. I was asked by Naruto to see if we could get an audience with the daimyo. Given my connection with the 12 guardians, we assumed we could get in to speak with him. Why would we need to speak with the daimyo? Tsunade asked, raising her eyebrow. Because I intend on revealing to him who I am and what my duty is, Naruto answered in a serious tone. His support will help us with the cleaning of Konoha. Well, that does make sense, Jiraiya commented, putting his hand to his chin. Especially when he figures out who you are. That'll certainly get him onto our side. Well then, let's not waste time, Asuma stated. Soon, they were at the palace of the daimyo. How did they get in? Well, to be fair, only Jiraiya, Tsunade, Asuma, Naruto, and his paths got in, but walking up to the daimyo's palace with 2 of the Sennin, one of them being the Hokage, a boy who looks like the yondaime, and the 4 past, does tend to stun a lot of people into speechlessness. They were halted at the gates, while one of the 12 guardians went to the daimyo to inform them of their arrival, and soon they were ushered in. The daimyo, needless to say, was speechless at who he saw before him. Well, this is a surprise, daimyo said with wide eyes. You could tell he was trying to keep calm, but the sight before him was obviously too much. When they told me that the 4 past were here, I thought they were pulling a terrible joke. They all laughed and Hashirama spoke. No, Daimyo-sama, we are indeed the past, and these fine redeeded women are the wives of 2 of us. Mito is mine, as I'm sure you know, and Kushina is the yondaime's. I was well aware of that last one, Daimyo smiled. Well, yondaime, would you mind explaining what is happening before my eyes? Certainly, Daimyo-sama, Minato smiles. First allow me to introduce mine and Kushina's son, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto bowed, pleasure to meet you, Daimyo-sama. Daimyo blinked, then smiled, likewise, Naruto-san. Anyway, the reason why we are here, Daimyo-sama, is because of him. How so? Daimyo looked at him curiously. His eyes are perhaps you've heard of it, Minato paused, gaining the daimyo's anticipation and curiosity. The Rinnegan. Daimyo's eyes widened, the eyes of the Rakuto Sennin. They're real. How is this possible? Allow me to explain. After the explanation, Daimyo leaned back in his chair, amazed and stunned by what he had learned. He then smiled, so then, Rakuto-sama, what do you need from me? We need some help cleaning out the corruption in Konohagakure. The daimyo blinked in surprise, Konoha's corruption. Yes, here is inside. Apparently, despite your efforts to fix Konoha after young Naruto's kidnapping, the civilian council has slowly been stealing more and more power from the Hokage and Shinobi Council. With no evidence to back our accusations, they were unable to fight back. The daimyo put his hand to his chin and thought a frown gracing his features. You wish for me to come to Konoha to help you clean up this mess of Konoha's making. Naruto stepped forward. Daimyo-sama, we know you don't really have any form of obligation to aid us in this endeavor. However, I ask you, as the reincarnation of the Rakuto Sennin himself, to please help us cleanse Konoha of the filth that seeks to take control through their pride and greed. Naruto's companion's eyes widened in surprise. When did Naruto get so mature? Tsunade thought, caught off guard by the knucklehead's mature request. Yes, I can't call him anymore, Jiraiya thought and smiled, shaking off his surprise. The daimyo smiled, well then, Rakuto-sama, I will accept your request. Of course, I need to teach the civilian council a lesson about what happens when they deny my will. I warned them before of their actions, but they still continued on with their foolish mistakes. No more. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the Rakuto Sennin, I shall go to Konoha. I shall be there about a day after you yourself should arrive. Is that acceptable? Hi, Daimyo-sama, Naruto bowed. I don't plan on revealing myself until that time if it's all the same with you. Of course. I shall see you again in Konoha, Rakuto-sama. Naruto nodded and turned to leave with the others before the daimyo spoke up, Rakuto-sama. Naruto turned back to the daimyo curious as to what the feudal lord wanted. I must ask about your supposed kidnapper. I have to admit the report about him disturbed me a little. Tell me a bit about him. Naruto blinked before looking at his paths. They simply shrugged. Jiraiya and Tsunade looked on curiously. They too were interested in his opinion of his mentor. Well, his name is Mahatsukai Kyosu, the harbinger of Yami. The god of darkness. Yep, he is. And you trust him? Of course, he's a tough mentor, but he's very compassionate despite serving such a dark being. I see. Well, let me inform you of this then, young Sennin, the daimyo began. My great-grandfather happened to have an encounter at some point while with a shinobi before Hashirama and Madara founded Konohagakure. The man claimed to be a harbinger of Yami as well, but he was not compassionate. He was dark, emotionless, and merciless. He killed the shinobi guard that my great-grandfather had because he apparently got in the way of a mission he was on. My great-grandfather barely managed to get away with his life. Why are you telling us this? Hashirama asked, seemingly speaking for all present. Kyosu hasn't done anything dastardly, at least not intentionally. He's just doing his job. Exactly. His ultimate loyalty is to the god of darkness, Yami. I know you trust him, young Senin, but, for the sake of your mission and your friends, I'd be wary of him. The more I think about this the more I feel something is amiss. Naruto nodded, I understand, Daimyo-sama. I will always be cautious. Very well then, Rakuto-sama, I shall see you in a couple of days. Farewell. So, basically he said to beware Kyosu? Niji asked. How does that make sense? All he's done is help us. Even so, the daimyo had a point, Kakashi said. Kyosu, despite his friendly nature, is ultimately loyal to the god of darkness, who, as we may guess, is probably not the friendliest, most loving guy in the world. Yes, he's a friend, but we don't know what Yami's motives are in all this, and we know Kyosu will ultimately have to follow his orders. We should be at least wary of what's going on with him. I think Kakashi's right, Naruto stated, surprising them. When he first introduced himself, I had asked him why Yami would want to help me, and from what he said, it sounds to me like Yami was forced into sending Kyosu to help me by Kami herself. I have this feeling that as soon as Kyosu's task is done, Yami is going to try something, since he obviously wasn't too enthusiastic about helping me. I hope Kyosu doesn't become an enemy, Tenten said. Agreed, Jiraiya nodded. He's powerful and he really hasn't given us a reason to be enemies. Shikamaru huffed, troublesome. Everyone gave him a blank stare and Tsunade sighed, come on. Let's go home. Kyosu walked quietly through the forest a good ways from Yuzurishi Agakure. He had to see someone who was very important in his life. His mind thought back to the conversation he had had with his master. The longer he was that god's harbinger, Kyosu thought, the more and more he regretted it. Then again, Kyosu thought. I would have never met my wife, nor would I have met my lover Bo. I mean, Naruto, too. After some time, he managed to reach an old, seemingly abandoned shrine. The key word there being seemingly. Itaosan. He heard a feminine voice shout. Kyosu turned to see a young girl with white hair and Kyosu's blue-black inverted eyes. She was only about 12 or 13 years old. Her hair was long, reaching mid-back, and she had a very slim and small build even for her age. Kyosu smiled and bent down to her, how are you Shinami? I trust you've been good for Tamashii-san. She has, came another voice. Kyosu looked up to see a face very familiar to him. It was a young man that seemed slightly younger than Kyosu himself. He had short black hair and the black, inverted eyes that Kyosu had, save that they were green instead of blue. He had similar wear as Kyosu himself save it wasn't as noble. That's good to hear. The young girl looked up at her father, Tamashii-sensei has been teaching me a lot, Itaosan. I've practiced Akasan Saneru Mijutsu and your Kage Mijutsu, too. I can imagine you're getting pretty good at it as well, Shinami, Kyosu smiled. Shortly after his wife's death he had found that his daughter had a strange, natural instinct for the use of his wife's Saneru Mijutsu, the techniques that were given to a harbinger of Kami. In basic terms, Saneru Mijutsu and Kage Mijutsu were yin and yang. The strange thing was that, normally, one needed to become a harbinger before being able to use either of these arts, and it was impossible to learn both, yet his daughter was succeeding at such. Then again, a harbinger of Kami and a harbinger of Yami had never married, nor had there ever been a record of any harbinger having a child before. So for all he knew maybe this was the reason. Being able to use these styles without being bound to either Kami or Yami. And that was a power to be feared. She has definitely improved a great deal. Give her a year or so, and she might be able to use Yami no Bakura. Really? Well. That is phenomenal. There was a short silence before Kyosu sighed, Tamashii. I need to speak with you alone. Tamashii's eyes widened a bit as he nodded, hi, sensei. Itaosan. Shinami, go inside. I must speak with your sensei alone. Shinami nodded sadly, hi, Itaosan. She walked back inside of the shrine, and Kyosu turned to his former student. By the saddened and serious look his sensei was giving him, Tamashii could tell something was wrong, and that it concerned Shinami. Tamashii, Kyosu began, taking a deep breath. I fear for my daughter. Why? Tamashii asked, slightly angered. He cared for Shinami, she was like the little sister he never had. What's wrong? Kyosu turned away slightly, I trust you know of my previous mission. Tamashii blinked, you mean training the Rakuto Senin Tensei? Yeah, I remember you talking about it a couple of years ago. Wasn't it something that Kami forced Yami to do? Something about working from the shadows done by those of the shadows. Wait, what do you mean by previous mission? Unofficially, the mission is over. Unofficially, I promised the kid that I'd help him in his quest to bring peace and order. And that's a problem, how? Yami ordered me to leave. You argued against Yami, are you mad? Quite. I don't want her to know. But, sensei. Tamashii, I've got until the Senin meets another Rinnegan user by the name of Nagato, then I fear Yami's going to corrupt my mind. What? Kazu-sensei, how could you agree to this? Kyosu didn't speak, but instead turned fully away. Tamashii instantly understood why, he threatened Shinami. Didn't he? Kyosu slowly nodded. Tamashii sighed, what is it you wish me to do? Protect her. From me. Tamashi's eyes widened, you think he might use you to get rid of her? I have a hunch. Sensei, you know if it came down to it, there's no way I could beat you. I know. Just, please keep her safe. I'm terrified for her safety. I can't lose anyone else. I know we can't refuse Yami, but. Why? If I didn't agree to it he would have just taken me over right then and there. Tamashi sighed, I understand, sensei. Your will shall be done. There was a brief silence before Tamashi spoke again, so you want to stay for a while? I'm sure Shinami would love to learn from you again. Aosu chuckled, of that, I have no doubt of that. Wow, this place sure doesn't change much now does it? Hashirama commented when they reached Konoha. Tabarama and Mito nodded in agreement. Tsunade smiled, you mean besides the extra heads on the Hokage monument? Yes, besides that. Naruto looked at the others and nodded, okay, remember, myself and my paths are not supposed to reveal ourselves until the council meeting tomorrow. So, does anybody know a place we can stay? You can stay at the Saratobi estate, Asuma said, speaking up. It's large enough for all 7 of you. Thank you, my son, Hiruzen smiled. Asuma returned it. Naruto smiled towards everyone else, okay, I'll see you all later. See you at the council meeting tomorrow, Bachan. With that, Naruto vanished shortly followed by his paths. Tsunade sighed and Jiraiya snickered, I bet your own grandparents won't stop teasing you about that now. Shut up, Arasenin. Hey. Everyone laughed at the scene. Tsunade then turned to the others, you are all dismissed. Rest well. It's going to be a long couple of days. After that, they each began to disperse each thinking their own thoughts on the situation. Well, tomorrow you throw the council through the ringer, Tsunade then smirked. You, me, and the daimyo are going to have so much fun ripping them a new one. I can't wait to see the shinobi and the civilian council's reactions to the return of the Rakuto Sennin, Jiraiya chuckled to himself. It's going to be hilarious. Naruto-kun, Hinata thought with determination. Even though you have to leave, I understand. You have to be the Rakuto Sennin, not Konoha's #1 knuckle-headed shinobi. Even so, I will always wait for you here, even for eternity if I have to. Oh, Sasuke grunted, annoyed. I admit, you've far surpassed me. Thinking about what you said has thrown me through a tornado of emotional conflict. I think I'm finally starting to understand what you are talking about. Damn, Sakura swore to herself. Thinks he's better than Sasuke. I bet Sasuke could beat that if he was really trying. Rakuto Sennin my ass. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered, but smirked nonetheless. Naruto is going to raise hell in the council tomorrow with the daimyo and the Hokage. I might just get up earlier to witness that. Naruto certainly has changed, Tenten thought back to how Naruto currently looked as the Sennin. I wonder if he'll let me see that sword of his. For someone who denies destiny, Neji smirked. You sure have accepted it very well. Nevertheless, you are still the Naruto we all know. Well, Naruto, good luck, Kakashi thought. You sure have made me proud. With that, everyone went home ready for the great changes coming the following day. Ah, it feels good to be back in my own house, Hiruzen commented when they reached the Saratobi estate. Can't say I can share the same feeling as you Jujutsu, Naruto shrugged. Can't exactly blame you, my boy, Sandaime sighed sadly. A saddened exhale breathed from the other paths at that. Hey. Came a voice. A voice Naruto and Hiruzen recognized instantly. Who are? The voice stopped dead as the 7 of them turned around. It was young Konohamaru who was frozen stiff at whom he was facing. Narutani. Jujutsu. Hello, Konohamaru, Hiruzen greeted his grandson with a smile. Jujutsu. Konohamaru shouted joyfully as he embraced his grandfather. The other path smiled happily at the reunion. But how is it possible? Narutani, what happened? Is this some kind of… Nope, Naruto answered. This is all real. And in order to know how, you must promise not to tell anybody until we announce it ourselves. I promise, Narutani. You know the old story of the Rakuto Sennin? Yeah, who doesn't? I am the Sennin's reincarnation. What? Really? Yep, and Jiji and the others and my clansmen are my paths. 6 people who act as extensions of myself. Konohamaru could only gape. By the way, the other man with yellow hair is Mayatausen, Namek is Minato, who you may know as the Yondaime. Your father's Yondaime? Yep, nice to meet you, Minato said to the boy. I'm Minato and you are? I am Saratobi Konohamaru, grandson of Sandaime, and I'm going to be Hokage. Gee, I wonder who that sounds like, Mito giggled. I didn't know we had a Naruto clone in the Saratobi clan. Why didn't you tell us, Hiruzen? Naruto and Konohamaru scratched the backs of their heads sheepishly, while Hiruzen chuckled nervously. Naruto then looked at the young Saratobi and told him, now, let us rest, Konohamaru. Tomorrow's a busy day for us so we need our rest. Would you come eat with me at Ichiraku's tomorrow after you're done? Ha. You know full well I'd never turn down a good bowl of ramen. Or 10, Tabarama muttered. No wonder that ramen joint likes you so much, his brother chuckled. The others joined in. Okay, Narutani. See you tomorrow. Have fun doing that business of yours. Don't worry. We will. It was the following day, and Naruto and his 6 paths were waiting outside the council room. They each had grins on their faces. The councils had already gathered inside the council room and the meeting was about to begin. Now all they had to do was wait for the daimyo who was arriving secretly into Konoha. As if on cue, the daimyo emerged with his samurai guards. They smiled at each other and nodded. The meeting was about to begin. Inside the council room. "Alright," Tsunade began, earning everyone's attention. "Before we begin, we have a special guest arriving for this meeting." This caused most of the council to blink in surprise. Shikaku spoke up, "And who might that be, Hikage-sama?" "That would be me," came a voice, and the council gasped in surprise as the fire daimyo entered the room. Danzo took a deep breath. He knew what was coming. "Daimyo-sama, what are you doing here?" "Indeed, what am I doing here? I believe your Hokage has the answer." All eyes turned to the Hokage as she smiled. "I assume you are all aware that a week ago myself and the Konoha 10 set out to use Ushiogakure to recover Naruto from the supposed kidnapper. At least I assume the parents of the shinobi who left know of this." The shinobi council all nodded while the civilian council blinked in surprise. "So you left to find the demon brat, huh?" one councilman asked, annoyed. "So where is that blonde brat?" The glare from both the Hokage and the daimyo shut him up. Tsunade sighed, "It is the reason why I called you here. We did in fact manage to locate Naruto." "You did?" Inoichi blinked in surprise. "I could have sworn he would have been announcing his return with that loud voice he has. Unless, of course, you were unable to actually retrieve him." Hiyashi's eyes narrowed. "No, he is here in Konoha," the daimyo stated matter-of-factly, surprising the council. Listening into this very conversation, in fact. "What?" a council member shouted. "He cannot listen in. He should be punished for such an action." "No, he will not," Tsunade said coldly and firmly. "He has both mine and Daimyo-sama's permission to listen in. This meeting does, after all, concern him." Tsunade smiled as she looked towards the entrance. "Isn't that right, Rakuto-sama?" "Really, Bachan?" Naruto said as he entered the room. A gasp escaped that council. "You know I hate formal stuff. Better get used to it." "Naruto," Shikaku said in surprise. "What the hell happened to you? What happened to your eyes?" "Well, you see." Naruto spent the next half an hour explaining his story about his taking and his training. He also explained who he truly was and some of the abilities he now possessed because of the Rinnegan. Both councils felt lightheaded after the explanation. Neither side had expected this, though the civilian side constantly shouted out denial against Naruto's claims. These were silenced by glares from both Tsunade and the daimyo respectively. "Now after all that, I assume you all wish to know who my 6 paths actually are." He received nods from both sides. "Very well then." He turned to the doorway from which he had entered. "Hey, you guys can come in now." It was then that 6 people entered the room. Horrified and stunned gasps filled the room, and many on both sides fell over in sheer surprise. Before them stood the first 4 and 2, stunning red-headed women. It's not possible," Hiyashi stated in sheer surprise. The other clan heads were sweating. Naruto had 4 Hokages now working for him. They silently prayed for the civilians of the village. "I assure you," Hiyashi Minato replied in a serious manner. "That is very possible." "Now, onto the first topic we wish to discuss," Kushina spoke up. A terrible glare fixated upon the councils caused them to sweat further. "And that is why you civilians abused mine and Minato-kun's son." Another round of stunned silence and horror filled the room. "Naruto was whose son?" One of the councilmen finally managed to say, "The demon brat is you?" Crunch. Kushina's and Minato's fists quickly found their way into the councilman's jaw, sending him flying out of the room. The civilian council recoiled in fear at the sudden attack. Minato growled, "The next person to call my son a demon gets up their ass. Are we clear?" Many of the council swallowed hard, and the killer intent leaking off the toothless Thantapi parents. They replied in unison, "Hi, Yandeme-sama." "Now then, I'm waiting for an answer," Kushina snarled murderously. Dead silence only followed. "You don't have one, do you? At least, not one you wish to admit." "Let me guess. It was prejudice because my son held something that had caused so much destruction. Because he held it, you used him as a scapegoat out of fear and anger." She took a deep breath and then screamed out in a roar that left the whole village shuddering in fear. "Do you know how idiotic that move was, you fucking bastards?" Minato's hand found its way to Kushina's shoulder. "Kushinakoi, calm down please." Kushina glared at him for a minute before backing down and allowing her husband to step forward. "I am only going to say this once to you ungrateful bastards. Naruto's seal is empowered by the Shinigami himself. It has no chance of breaking unless Naruto unseals the demon himself or Naruto dies. That's right, the boy your civilians beat daily is not only my son, but beating him could have very well unsealed the Kyuubi. Not to mention that if you had him killed, not only would I have convinced Kami to let me back down to earth to beat all your ass into the ground, but Kyuubi would have been freed." The civilian council swallowed hard and sweated even more profusely. Their fear and hatred could have freed the demon they were trying to kill both physically and emotionally. Dear Kami, were they lucky. At least, until the parents of said demon container had returned. How about we get to the actual reason why we are here, Mito spoke up. One of the councilmen blinked, my lady, forgive me for asking, but who are you? Mito's eye twitched and Hashirama sighed, that is Uzumaki Mito, my wife. She was the first Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. She was what they shouted out. Kyuubi's been in the village that long? Sum shouted out in a surprised tone. Yes, Mito stated as if it was obvious. Only members of the Uzumaki clan have the ability to be the Jinchuriki of Kyuubi. I myself was the first, Uzumaki Kushina, wife of the Yondaime, was the second, and her son, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto is currently the third. Everyone gaped. Who would have thought? Anyway, back on topic, Tobirama spoke out forcefully. Yes indeed, Hashirama agreed as he proceeded to glare at the civilian council. So, I hear you've been slowly taking power from the Hokage and giving it to yourselves. Is that true? His eyes said everything. He was daring them to lie to him. Yes, the daimyo said with a dead serious tone. I would like to know this as well. They began to pale further. Again, their actions were coming to bite them in the ass. Well, Shada-sama, Daimyo-sama, a council member began, trying his best not to stutter out nervously. You see. We were simply, Well, we were simply. Answer the question, the Shadai shouted angrily. Yes, the answer was a squeak, but everyone heard it. Tobirama's eyes narrowed, you do realize this is a shinobi village, right? We allowed you a word in because you are members of this village, too. However, the Hokage has complete authority over what happens in this village. You and the Shinobi Council are to advise him or her. You should know this. You also disobeyed my decrees, did you not? Daimyo frowned. I punished you for your impudence, and all you did was try to grasp onto more and more power to, if I am not mistaken, help repel the punishments I have taken off of yourself. Am I not correct? The council bowed their heads in shame. You are, Daimyo-sama. So? Tell me why I should not have you executed for treason. The council shouted out its surprise, horror, and began to beg for mercy. Silence. You tried to gain power away from the cage of a shinobi village, and you did it not only to have control over this village, but to also get out of the punishment I set upon you. That is treason and an attempt at usurping power. Give me one good reason to execute you all right now. Daimyo-sama, Naruto spoke up. May I say something? The daimyo took a deep breath, very well, Rakuto-sama. Naruto looked directly at them all, I don't hate you. Despite everything you did, I still wanted to become Hokage and protect this village. Now, I cannot become Hokage, for I am the Rakuto Sennin. I will bring peace and order, and I can't do this without asking you to change your ways. Naruto turned to the daimyo, Daimyo-sama, I request that a time of probation be placed upon the civilian council. They are unable to attend meetings or be able to use any benefits of the position for 6 months. After that, I request they have one last chance to redeem themselves. They will return, if proven ready and worthy to return, to their positions with the amount of power they are supposed to have. Advising and reporting civilian problems and profits to the Hokage. If they attempt anything like this again, then your sentence on them shall be carried out. Is this alright with you, Daimyo-sama? There was a pause as the daimyo thought it over. The Shinobi Council, the Godaime, and the Six Paths all looked at their feudal lord with curiosity, wondering if he would accept Naruto's terms, while also wondering why Naruto would request such a thing. Tsunade smiled, that is too damn nice and hopeful. Well, he may be the Rakuto Sennin, but he's still Naruto. Glad to know that hasn't changed at all. On the other side of the room, the civilian council was shaking with nervousness while silently thanking the innocent boy who they put down so needlessly and foolishly and vowed to treat him better next time. They were also begging to sweat Kami above that the daimyo allowed them to live. The daimyo sighed then smiled, very well, Rakuto-sama. One more chance. The council breathed a sigh of relief, though still inwardly upset that they lost all the power they had struggled to gain. However, the council immediately went on edge again. A single step offline will result in you being a head shorter, and there will be a test once probation is up, and a strict one at that. If you do not pass, you will not regain your position. Are we clear? Hi, Daimyo-sama. Now then, Rakuto-sama. I do believe it is time for our little announcement to the village, do you not agree? Naruto smiled, indeed, I believe it is time. Anbu, Tsunade called out. Immediately 3 Anbu appeared. Call all shinobi and civilians for an important announcement. Attendance is mandatory. Hi, Hokage-sama, they answered and left. That is all. You are all dismissed. As they all got up to leave, Tobirama took a closer look at his old students as they muttered disgusted words to each other. He also noticed the chakra signatures coming off of another they were talking to. Danzo. Chakra signatures that were all too familiar to him. He glanced at his fellow paths and they nodded back their understanding. Hiruzen turned to Tsunade, Sanada him, how long will it take to gather everyone for the announcement? Tsunade blinked in surprise. Shouldn't he know this? A couple of hours I should think, sensei. Very well, that's plenty of time. Hashirama looked towards Naruto, may we? Naruto nodded, go. With that, the 6 paths left, leaving a confused Tsunade and Fire Daimyo. Tsunade spoke up, Naruto. What's going on? Naruto looked at her with a serious face, it looks like we really do have a couple treacherous rats after all. Do not worry, however. The exterminators have been dispatched. Oh wow, I am so sorry guys that this took so long. I promise that the next chapter won't take this long. I'm sorry but my life has been busy. Anyway, thanks for reading and please read and review. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to PM me. Oh and here's the Amik I promised. Hidipro, Amik warning. Semi-crack segment plus out of culture song. That was when Kaosu spoke up, well, one last thing before we go off to do whatever. Myself and the paths all made a bet on how many of you would faint. Which was 9 or you. Since no one picked 9 we've all officially lost. So, because of this, we all have to sing you a song. The paths all sighed. Kaosu followed suit, ready? 1, 2, 3. I'm a little teapot, short and stouts, here is my handle, here is my spout, when I get all steamed up, I just shout, dip me over and pour me out, I'm a very special pot, it's true, here's an example of what I can do, I can turn my handle into a spout, dip me over and pour me out, I'm a little teapot, short and stouts, here is my handle, here is my spout, when I get all steamed up, I just shout, dip me over and pour me out, I'm a very special pot, it's true, here's an example of what I can do, I can turn my handle into a spout, dip me over and pour me out, by the end, the entire group was laughing their asses off. Even Sasuke and Sakura gave out a little chuckle. They had just witnessed 4 past Hokages, 2 Exchinchuricus of the greatest of the Biju, and a harbinger of Yami sing I'm a little teapot. Never again would any shinobi see such a hilarious sight. Oh Kami, that is too much, Kiba shouted, rolling along the ground. Make it stop. Oh, please make it stop, Tenten gasped out. Oh this is amazing blackmail, Shikamaru smirked. Payback for all the times you've embarrassed me, Jijisen, Bachin, Tsunade laughed out loud. Kaosu sighed, yeah, laugh it up. Just know that Naruto gets his pranking side from me, Kushina grinned. And I'm sure the other paths wouldn't mind joining in, wouldn't you? Payback's a bitch, Mito smirked. The other shinobi instantly stopped laughing. Yeah, thought so. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoy it. If you want the next part of this video, turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the others' videos. I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys in the next video. Till that. Take care.